Someone make it make sense.
Probably a couple.
All right, guys, today was a big day. Big day. For Runkle and for the greater LawTube community. Shout out to Flash and shout out to Mary, first in the chat. So here's the thing. This was amazing. And I thought I would go live because there's so much that I know you guys are going to want to talk about, as is extremely appropriate. There was like over 40,000 people, I think, in the chat for Runkle. And some of you guys I saw in the chat, I don't even know if it was flying by and it was really difficult to talk to our squirrel friends. But nonetheless, there's some really interesting things that were said. And I just really, first of all, I want to say this. Huge shout out and props to Runkle for nabbing this interview, right? These two guys could have done their first interviews after this verdict, right? They could have done this anywhere with anybody. And, I have to say, of all of the people, and you guys know how much I love different, law tubers, but of all of the people, I feel like this was such an appropriate, and this just felt right for me. You guys know how much I love Runkle, and they chose him. And, maybe we'll see them come on other channels. I don't know, but dude, Runkle nailed this and interview, and props to him for that. And he freaking, you guys know how much I adore Runkle. And I know you guys also adore Runkle. So I know we were all excited, of everybody, right? Of anyone that could get this interview. If I could have wished this upon anybody, myself included, right? I would have wished this for Runkle. Additionally, Runkle reached 300K today. But what I did was I made sure to pay attention at the very beginning of the live stream, like when he first went live, which is like where we're at here, where I have it paused. When he first went live, he had 302,000 subscribers. And whenever I switched this over so that I could go live, he was at I think 307 or 308. So in other words, it was a beautiful thing to watch him gaining, several thousand more subscribers during the course of this live stream. Those numbers are probably still going up. It'll be really fun to see where he's at by the time we get done. But a shout out to Runkle on this. Mary says she doesn't know how long she'll be on because she's super duper sleepy. Totally fine. It's all good. Flash just got back from taking the dog out. Hopefully the dog has been doing better about not, like, what was it, eating your socks or something, or peeing on your socks, for anyone who's like, what the heck. Flash's sister just got a puppy, and I think it's Flash's first time having a dog around, so it's new territory for Flash. And I sent Twiz his special text, and when he gets here, I have something fun we're going to do to celebrate Twiz being so special. So props to Runkle, but this is such a great thing that he did for all of us, because now we get to hear from these two incredible, wonderful, amazing men who were responsible in part, along with the rest of her team, for securing this verdict that was appropriate and was so important for so many of us. So, all right, let's take a listen.
We've got David YANETTI and Bob ALESSI. Welcome.
Hello.
Thanks so much, Ian.
Oh, thank you. I am a huge fan. I think everybody here is. I think the chat will be very upset with me if I don't say thank you and congratulations, because...
Now, I have to also say, I was so nervous for him waiting for this to go live that I felt nauseous, knowing how he must feel, because it goes without saying that this is like, he's nervous, right? But having said that, if you guys remember when he had Bettero on for the first time, and Bettero is awesome. Bettero is a big deal, but Bettero is not these guys, right? Like Bettero is awesome, but like the other thing about Bettero is Bettero comes on people's channels all the time. He speaks out a lot, right? These guys, this is like, you can't even compare the two. But Runkle commented on how nervous he was when Bettero came on for the first time and how he was like, I'm going to throw up. I'm so nervous with Bettero and like, da-da. I can only imagine how he must have felt in this moment. So I just empathize with that, you know, nervous, but it's in a good way, right? Excited, but nervous. Like, this is a huge freaking deal. So
what you guys, you know, your team pulled off was frankly epic. I guess the first question I have is just how did it feel in the moment where you heard sort of, as Jackson put it, the not guilty, not guilty, not guilty rolling in? Like, what was the feeling in that moment?
David, you had the best reaction, so I'd love to hear from you.
So it didn't go smoothly, which I'm not used to. Typically, it's a clear, not guilty or guilty, whatever the verdict is. But sort of in keeping with that, kind of complicated verdict slip on count number 2, I was having trouble figuring out what is he saying. I mean, I heard the not guilty for count 2, but then I heard the court go, that's not really right, right? And thankfully, the clerk, I think, immediately skipped to count 5, which, obviously we were hoping for. That was the one count that was not going to have, likely serious consequences for Karen. Once I heard that, I was pretty confident we were home free, but still there was count number 3 to come. And I mean, like any verdict, Bob's a little different here. I think that, we've had a lot of discussions, and when a jury's out, he's cool as a cucumber. I am not. I am stressed, and my stomach is doing knots. And when I'm waiting for that, verdict, I can't look at the jury. I'm just in a zone of pain until the final verdict came in, and whenever it came in, not guilty on the 3rd. I mean, I couldn't control my emotions. I'm a little embarrassed that I
don't be embarrassed.
Sort of broke down in tears a little.
I know he can't hear me, but like these are just don't be embarrassed. I mean, the thing is like him crying was all this. To be honest, I was surprised that there wasn't more crying, like bigger crying, louder crying, more crying, because I lost my shit. I lost my shit as soon as that, it was hard to tell, like he said, right, exactly what the verdicts were because there was that confusion. But as soon as I heard that roar from the crowd outside, and every time if I go back and watch, like, I can't not lose it, right? Especially being someone who's like, as a musician and like really like that sound for me, like, is just super, super, super impactful. It reminds me of like my favorite sound in the world is the sound of an orchestra tuning. And that the sound of that crowd yesterday or 2 days ago might be my second favorite sound in the entire world. Like that was just so momentous and epic. And it's like that sound, like, I don't know, it's just crazy, right? But anyway, I was surprised there wasn't more crying, louder crying, bigger crying. So anywho, yeah, Meg says I cried right then and there. Flash, that's just not true and stupid. No offense to you. I mean, I know you're just saying that's what people say, but that's dumb. But did I say welcome to Kane? I think I saw Kane pop by. And also we don't know where Twiz is yet. I sent him a special text, so.
Well, it's the first time in my career that my client has had to comfort her attorney as a result of the verdict. It's supposed to go in the other direction, but I can't describe how I was feeling at that point, other than yay us, we did it.
And there's that moment where I saw you pick Mr. ALESSI up and you.
And by the way, we haven't talked about this, but when I think about it now.
I just wanted to note that, look, I love Mr. Yanetti's smile. I just want to note that Mr. Yanetti was saying, as far as being embarrassed about crying, it wasn't because he's a dude. He's saying it's because usually you're the one who's supposed to be comforting your client, and it was the other way around. That's what he was saying. Oh my God, come on.
I'm thinking Bob probably didn't like that, because Bob's a boxer. Bob is a take charge guy. And, I just couldn't control myself. I love this man so much. It wasn't enough to hug him. I had to physically lift him up. And poor Bob, he's got a bad neck. he wanted to get me back, and he tried to pick me up. I don't know if the camera caught it, but I think the problem he's muscular and svelte, and I'm a little bit bigger, and I'm just glad he didn't get hurt.
Yeah, so my reaction, just to go from my angle, was I was steely focused on making sure everything went right and legal, and we didn't end up with issues that David and the team had the first trial. So as people probably saw, my eyes were darting.
Yeah,
I'm looking at the
that.
foreman. I'm looking at the jurors. I'm trying to see if the jurors are saying, you know, something like, oh my, no, that's not right. I was looking at every procedure in case we needed to speak up, because we couldn't have, just as a baseline, we couldn't have the problems we had in the first trial. And so that was my focus.
In other words, he wasn't really experiencing the moment the way that the other attorneys were. And, you know, maybe in likely Karen, the way we were, right, like waiting for the verdict. He was laser focused on the task at hand, which was making sure that this was done properly and that there weren't issues. So that's a whole different situation. I bet it was probably, you know, once that was all done, then I bet it could finally sink in for him, you know?
Because I wasn't really focused on, okay, what's it going to be? I just wanted to focus on at the moment is what the jury wants. Is it going to be delivered, and is it going to be recorded properly? So that was my focus. Once I saw that happening, you know, I was certainly happy. David can get into it at the appropriate time, and Ian, when you want us to, about what my predictions were for the day
or
the time.
Yeah.
I was more focused at the moment on make sure I got it right, and then I was focused on the clock because I made a prediction for the verdict.
This is a funny story.
And so I was looking at the clock. But once it all came down, I was very, very happy. And as you saw, I went over and hugged Karen. But my second was a run over to David, give him a hug. I think it was a combination of me hugging and jumping, and then David lifting. But whatever it was, all I can tell you was I don't remember much. At that point, it was just emotion. I was just happy for everybody, most of all for justice, most of all for truth. But close seconds was just the interpersonal aspect of this. We worked so hard. We worked so long. We worked so well together. And when you do all of that, the outcome is not certain. And when we got the outcome, it was absolutely joyous. And whatever happened after that was just exuding joy.
It's a tough thing, right? Because like as a defense attorney, you know, it's like there's a lot, a lot of things in life, right? Your result will be likely a reflection of your effort, right? Like, for example, with music is like this, right? With violin or with any other instrument. It's like the more that you've practiced and prepared and whatnot, and the more, you know, the years you've put in and then the time you've put in, all that is going to have, there's going to be a direct correlation between that and, like, you know, the quality of a performance, or even just practicing or whatever, or even just the quality of your playing in general, or like studying for a test, whatever the case may be. This being a defense attorney, it's a very unique thing where your level of preparation, but also your skill set level, like your level of skill, your level of dedication, right? And all of that, it's a really unique situation where the outcome may not be any reflection on the effort, the time, the care put in. And in fact, it usually isn't, because as we know, defense attorneys are almost always getting guilty verdicts, right? And that's just a tough thing to wrap the head around, right? Like, you have to get used to, you know, if you're a defense attorney, like, you have to get used to this idea that the outcome is going to be completely opposed to the effort and the dedication that you put in. And you can't base you know, you can't base your own, how to say it, you know, in terms of assessing, right? Assessing yourself or whatever, you know, whether you call it self-worth or just your skill set level or whatever, you can't base that on the outcome, is because the outcome is in the jury's hands. And again, it's almost always going to be guilty. You know, so, and that's, of course, you know, like, what I'm saying is, like, if you are these guys, right? Or if you're Alan Jackson, where you are literally a top-notch defense attorney, and you are going to put you put the work in, the effort, the time, you have the skill and all that, if all that's there, right? But yet you're still, if you're getting a guilty verdict, like, you can't, or even a hung jury, right? You can't can't be a reflection on you as an attorney, although you know that they're still going to be super critical, right? It seems like it's just a difficult thing in terms of like it's like a mind fuck in a way, right? Because again, usually the payoff of a thing is going to have a correlation with the effort put into it. So anyway, let me see what you guys are staying in the chat. Fender is here. Woke up at 4:30 a.m. to catch this live. Well, we're so glad you're here. So did you not see Runkles yet then? Because if not, then that's fine because we're watching it all now. So, oh, that's funny, Megs. That said that ALESSI saw her question about 24 miles an hour. Yeah. All right. So let's see.
Was the prediction 227?
I'll let
Well,
David.
no, that would have been a little trite. On Friday, the jury went out, and of course, we didn't expect a quick turnaround verdict on Friday. A couple of my buddies who are lawyers said,
Gotcha.
This jury's coming right back. It's as if they walked out of the courtroom backwards, right? But after we went, through what we went through last time, I wasn't expecting a quick verdict. Looking at the jury during this trial, they all paid such close attention, and they were so conscientious. There are hundreds of exhibits. I knew they were going to go through everything, and they weren't just going to rush this. So we didn't expect anything on Friday, but I was thinking Monday. Bob told the whole team, he said, no, we're going to get a verdict on Wednesday. And he said, I'm not going to be concerned unless they don't come back by the end of the day on Wednesday. And so, we go through Monday, and on Monday, Bob modified that prediction and said, you know what? They're coming back at 3 p.m. on Wednesday. All right. We go through the rest of Monday. We're hoping for Tuesday, but boy, they didn't want to come back at the end of the day. And then we had that kind of head fake with, we've got a verdict. Oh no, we don't. And now we're like, all right, we're getting a verdict today. Right. And Bob and I looked at each other when the jury was in the room and the verdict was about to be read, and there's a digital clock right in front of us. And I swear to God, it said 3-0-0. It was unbelievable.
So I predicted 3 o'clock, the modification. On Monday, I predicted not only Wednesday, but I predicted it would be 3 o'clock. And I elbowed David when the clock showed 3 and 3-0-0, and they started reading the verdict.
That is amazing. And how the false verdict, like the weird false start. Have you ever seen anything like that? And what was going through your heads when that came
Mary,
in?
Judge
Well, I'll tell you what the answer is. I've never seen anything like that. But I will tell you, and I said this to the team. I said, I believe. Listen, I'm not a soothsayer. I don't read people's minds. I just say this is what I believe.
Oh wait, what's that you say? What's that you're saying, Mr. ALESSI? Hang on, I've got a thing.
Well, I'll tell you what the answer is. I've never seen anything like that. But I will tell you, and I said this to the team. I said, I believe. Listen, I'm not a soothsayer. I don't read.
I'm not Nostradamus.
People's minds. I just say this is what I believe is happening. And I said, I believe they really want to get this right. They don't want to be like the jurors in the first case. So I believe what happened was they came to their resolution. Somebody had a second thought about how they filled out the form and said, whoa, wait a minute. I've looked at it again. I'm concerned. Let's call it back and let's make sure we got it right. And I believe that's what happened. They were, as David said, this was as attentive, conscientious, poker playing jury I've ever seen. And that was the basis for me informed speculating that they just wanted to make sure they got it right. I had zero concern about them not agreeing. I just thought they just wanted to make sure they got it right. And all of this, in my judgment, was—
And that makes sense because the jurors that spoke out, or at least one of the jurors that spoke out, mentioned that the forms were exactly the same. They didn't change anything. Okay, so a couple things. So Fender is going to be changing her command now that we're done with Bev. But now that Twiz is here, I wanted to show you guys something because this is really fucking funny. Hold on, I just have to unshare, reshare. All right, of all the things, guys, I hope Heather's watching because she'll think this is hilarious as well. So this is me texting Twiz. So you know how I always say I have sending your special text. So this is from yesterday, right? Wednesday, sending your special text. Okay, so then today, right? Twiz texts me, Chelsea, and I said, yes, Twiz, and there's the pants, because I always think of it, in my brain, I'm like, Twiz pants, right? He's being extra Twizzy. What are you doing? I said, is that a joke? He says, nope. And I said, of all the things, and he says, 100% serious. I still thought maybe it was a joke because of course we all know what was happening, right? Like we're like, what is that? Over an hour into this interview, right? At the time. Then the next part, oh, sorry, that's my thumbnail. So then we have, wait, where is it? Hold on. Part 2. Okay, I just have to unshare, reshare. Okay, part 2. He says, I was watching another podcast, LOL. So he was on YouTube watching something else. I don't know. And then we have the Twiz, how, LMAO, so special. And then there's the pants. And then he says, I know. And I put it in the Discord and it was like, facepalm, 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 facepalm. It's like of all of the Twiz moments, because there's like, this is like an everyday thing, right? But like of all of the things, I love though how it starts with the Chelsea, what are you doing? And it's like, anyway. So yay, Twiz, you're so special, one of a kind, truly one of a kind. So yep. And I mentioned this at the beginning of the live stream, but Runkle gained, like I was keeping track of how many subs he gained during the course of the live stream. And I don't know where he's at now. Let me see if I can see where he's at now. So he broke 300K today, but when he literally went live, like that's when I started really paying attention. So when he went live with like the thing he does, the intro, or whatever, he had 302K. Let's see where he's at now. And now he's at 307K. So over the course of the live stream so far, he's gained 5K, which is awesome. So happy for him, and he deserves it. What, if any, encryption do I have? I don't know what you mean by that. So it's like, so Twiz needs a special text, not just for when I go live, but for like anything. So there we go. Well, so I was keeping track of the subs because I knew this was going to happen, and Runkle deserves it. You know what I mean? Like this is a huge, let me just reshare. This is such a huge fucking deal that I was just really genuinely curious, like how many people are going to sub. Because I'm sure there were people who didn't actually know who he was, which I don't understand, but I'm sure there were people who didn't know who he was. But because of this interview, they're like, oh, okay, right? You know what I mean? And so, you might have needed to refresh it, Fender, because when I made this live stream, like whenever that was, like an hour ago, he had 306. So, but you have to refresh it to see. I don't know how Kane doesn't know who Runkle is. That's very confusing to me because we talk about Runkle, not just me, but like in the chat. Runkle is talked about on every live stream because we all love Runkle. So, and Need Some Z's, shout out to Need Some Z's, who actually told me about this live stream last night. She commented on the live stream from last night because I think Runkle had just set that up. She commented and was like letting me know. She was sending me my special text basically, like as if I was Twiz. And so thank you for letting me know Need Some Z's last night. Fender, did you decide on your new command? Yeah, he's amazing. He's free. Like I said at the beginning of the live stream, if someone had said to me, look, YANETTI and ALESSI are going to give their first interviews and you could pick anybody in the world, including yourself, and who do you think they should have their interview with? Like, who would you wish this upon? Who would you gift this to? Who do you think deserves to have this interview with them? And I would say Runkle. 100%. This is just exactly how, like, to me, this was exactly right. I love him so much. So, okay. All right. So, Fender, let us know if you figured out your new command, and we're going to keep watching.
It's engendered by an unnecessarily confusing verdict slip.
Were you surprised that we actually have seen jurors since then say, we had trouble figuring out this verdict slip?
David is a master at Massachusetts verdict slip. There's only one person in the world, I believe, that should answer that question. He's
Well,
the handsome guy in the green shirt.
there's no handsome guy in the green. Well, there is a handsome guy in the green shirt because my hair is blue. But with the verdict slip, we had the same issue last time, and it was too confusing. And I think the problem was that there were two theories of potential guilt for, I think, 3 of the 5 charges, maybe 4 of the 5 charges. But in any case,
now,
you not only
we talked about this a lot, right? Because of the whole thing with the BAC versus the blood alcohol level versus like the under intoxication.
you had to check guilty if you were going to convict her of something, but then you had to check either 1 or 2 boxes underneath that. And there was no option if you went past the charged conduct and you got into lesser included. The only not guilty verdict option was up the top, and it did say not guilty of the offense as charged and all lesser included charges, but none of us were comfortable with that. And sure enough, the jury comes back with a question that is focused on the confusing verdict slip. And we had I went to my alma mater, Boston College Law School, and I went to my evidence professor, who I believe is the best evidence professor in the country after Bob ALESSI retired as an evidence professor. And I said, it was Mark Broden, a man I greatly admire. He taught me evidence, and he's made a lot of good lawyers over the years. And I said, Professor Broden, do you have anybody, any students that you'd recommend, who might want to be interns? And he put the call out, and my goodness, we were overrun with students that wanted to be a part of it. And we were fortunate enough to get really top-notch students, not just from BC, but from Harvard Law School as well. We love them all. But I'll single out one, which is the valedictorian at BC Law, which means he's a heck of a lot smarter than I ever was, Lee Moore. And Lee came up with the verdict slip that ultimately we suggested to the court. And it was much like a civil verdict slip, right? Where there a special verdict slip.
That one of the interns came up with that verdict slip. And he's absolutely right about this. And we talked about this. We literally talked about this because I was saying how, like, I gave this just an easy, quick example of Kowalski v. J. Hatch, and how, there were a lot more decisions that had to be made. To walk through that verdict slip, it was just like, but they made it simple because they made it out. They went through it step by step, right? They didn't make it convoluted. But anyway, it's just interesting that he notes this.
Where the jury is asked certain questions. And if you say yes, go here. If you say no, go there. And it laid out all the charges.
It's like a flow chart, right? Like there's a flow chart. It's like with anything where it's like, if the answer is yes, go to question, go to part A. If the answer is no, skip to part C or whatever. It's like that. Literally, that is how this verdict slip needed to be for the jury. And it didn't quite get there, but it got better than it was initially, which isn't saying much. But yeah, 100%. And whenever you've got lesser included, and there's, I don't know why you wouldn't make verdict slips like that for criminal trials when there are other considerations and it's not so simple, right? There's been other criminal trials that we've seen that do have a more complicated charging scheme, right? But not as complicated as it was here. But there are other times where that is appropriate, right? If A, then go to thing B, right? Or whatever. Anyhow, so.
Charges in order, and it walked them through all the way down from charge 1 to 5. And it was beautiful. And he was the one to come up with it, not the lawyers. But it was like a light went off. We're like, eureka. So, we suggested it. It was rejected. Maybe in part because it's not common in a criminal case to do that, right? But ultimately, when they came back with the question, they got a verdict slip that was pretty similar to what Lee had suggested. Thank goodness, and it all worked out.
I actually wanted to ask about the interns because there's a bunch of interns sort of helping behind the scenes. I hope they're getting sort of proper recognition, and I hope they've all updated their resumes to put this down, and maybe a firm graduation date as opposed to a Burgess date. But can you talk sort of about the interns and sort of what they were doing, like what was going on there? Because they're kind of the unsung people on this.
Yeah, first of all, these interns all have secured legal positions. They are wildly successful and no surprise. And they had secured those positions before they started with us. Secondly, just to show the depth of their commitment and the character of them, they all asked their summer employers and other employers if they could just continue on with the case and stay heavily involved. And while some, didn't really have immediate employment, all of the third years that have graduated have a bar exam coming up. So they're supposed to be studying for one of the most important exams they're ever going to take. And they are almost 24/7 working with us on this case. That's first point about it. Second point is the one second year who did have a summer position and a good one, basically asked them if she could stay on, and they were great. So first I want to say about them is just the extraordinary commitment that they had. The second thing is they were extraordinarily skilled, some stunningly so with regard to their savvy, etc. So how were they utilized? It started out sort of legal research, cases, and as people know, I read every case, I read every line.
No.
And I was very much impressed with the research. They would give us great material from which we could draft. Some of them drafted some things that we would revise, but they were essentially, Ian, they were essentially functioning at the end as associates in a law firm. That's the level of skill they had. And we were treating them and relying upon them as associates in law firm, despite the fact that I am a partner in a very, very large firm. I brought with me no one. And I had my paralegal, Carol Clark, who's the greatest paralegal who's ever walked the planet. And she and I have worked together for 34 years.
That is freaking amazing. 34 years. No, I don't think he will copyright for a number of reasons. First of all, he really hates copyright claims. Second of all, technically you can't, because if I literally was just streaming it start to finish without interjecting or offering commentary, then that would be different. But that's the whole thing. That's why it's really annoying, right? Like with Law and Crime, for example, when you are offering commentary, or even if you just, if you alter this in any way, like someone else alters it in any way, it's not, you can't copyright claim it, right? It's considered to be, what's the right word? I can't remember. I had to talk about this a lot when people used to ask me that with EDB doing Deppy Heard back in the day with the sidebars and stuff. And I was like, no, like it's not the original thing just being played, right? Like if you do anything to it, then it's not the same thing. And also, I mean, again, like everybody knows how much I like absolutely adore Runkle and give him all of the credit, obviously. Like I keep saying, like I said, if I could choose who deserved this interview and who would I want to have this interview more between him and anybody on the planet, including myself. Like if somebody said YANETTI and ALESSI, they this is hypothetical, right? Obviously, like if you could have them come on your channel to give their first, no, Runkle, I choose Runkle. Literally, that's how much I love him. So, yeah, this is a mission from God. Yep. I mean, yeah, and that's the thing is like I want, like, if anything, I mean, unlikely that someone who will watch this channel that doesn't watch Runkle or didn't know who he was, but should that happen, I mean, it seems like Kane doesn't know who Runkle is, right? That already happened. So there we go. That proves my point. Now Runkle might gain a subscriber via me playing this and talking about it because Kane didn't know who Runkle was. So, why are you sorry, Twiz? Hold on. Did I miss something? Why are you sorry? Twiz is sorry for something. Yeah, fair use. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah. Oh, he's very chill. He's completely anti people that are, I mean, he's been covering things on his channel recently in terms of that as well, right? Like it's the same reason why all the law tubers get pissed like Law and Crime for copyright strike, or like any of the other people that copyright strike. Like the people that copyright strike are like those big, like when we tried to watch the Lori Vallow interview or whatever, and it's like they just have it set up to where it automatically hears the audio and like, or whatever it does and takes it down. But like, anyway, it's I'll give another example. For example, today Uncivil Law was streaming, and I watched just a second of it when I was on my break at the law firm. And what Uncivil Law was literally streaming was he was literally streaming from Turtle Boy's live stream last night, just like the same thing I'm doing here, where he was like just playing Turtle Boy's live and then commenting on stuff. So anyway, So Kane, I was just saying that you're an example of someone who seems to not know who Runkle was, but you learned about him through me, through now, like tonight. You know what I mean? So, anywho.
I had her.
What lady is
But
that?
these interns were absolutely phenomenal, and they were in our hotel toward the end, and almost literally working around the clock as we worked almost around the clock. Cannot say enough about them. Can't say enough about their character and their commitment, and what a tremendous resource.
And the other, you mentioned it earlier. I just wanted to sort of talk about how you guys worked as a team, because I've been like, 2 lawyers representing somebody, and I can't say that when I did that, it ever looked like the way you guys did. Because I could see, when one person's up, arguing, there's somebody else possibly passing a note or giving like a little, sort of nudge. I could see there's various places where clearly, somebody's up there, doing a cross, and I can sort of feel that they're borrowing elements from that might have been helped from someone else. So how does that all come together, and sort of how does that teamwork sort of happen here?
You got the best person to answer that, because David YANETTI put the team together.
100%.
Well, so I think at the outset, Ian, I think what you're getting at is you have type A personalities, attorneys who are used to controlling their own fate.
Mm-hmm.
And typically, there's no room for 4 cooks in the kitchen. Somebody has to be making the
it
call.
would be akin to like saying, okay, we're going to put a group together. So it's the same thing. Type A personalities, like attorneys, same thing for violinists, especially if you're used to being concertmaster or if you're used to being first violin. Same thing, right? Same type of personality. It would be like saying, okay, we're going to assemble like a small chamber group, and we're going to put 16, first violinists all together. It would be a disaster. It would be really a disaster.
All as to how things are going, and other people have to fall in line and be subordinate,
I agree with that.
usually, for things to work right. And there have probably been other cases where people have joined forces, and maybe there's some it's not outward, but maybe there's some infighting behind the scenes, or jockeying for credit, or fighting over who's going to do what. We had very little of that. And I've never been a second chair on a case in my career.
That's like being second violin. That's really funny.
ALESSI, I would venture to guess, has never been a second chair, or if he was 17 years old. And certainly Alan Jackson is always a first chair himself. So, we had 3 attorneys who were used to being number 1, and that can't happen in a case like this. There was plenty of work to go around. The preparation behind the scenes in terms of what would otherwise be sort of, I don't want to say rudimentary direct examinations, but direct examinations in other cases where you really wouldn't be stressing about it. But my goodness, the time that we spent on every single examination, every oral argument, openings, closings, we all worked together. And, I have to give a lot of credit for the way the team functioned to Karen Reed. Karen put this team together as well. And she was not the type of person, I'm not going to reveal anything that she said to us, nor can I, and I know you understand that. But just in general, I don't think she'd have an objection if I flatter her. So just in general, I mean, she rolled up her sleeves, and, she got really up to speed on, trial strategy, and she knew the police reports and the discovery material better than the lawyers on the team. And
Wow.
Nobody wanted to disappoint her. And I can speak for myself. I know Alan and Liza and Bob, I think, felt the same way. We all wanted the result. We wanted to be on those courthouse steps elated. And we knew what we were up against and how difficult a job that was. And I think all of us knew that whose ever idea it is, if it's the best idea, it's got to carry the day. And there was nobody on this team who was not open to constructive criticism, to input. I'm proud to have, worked with these attorneys and with Karen and all the interns and everybody we had going on with us. It was a unique experience. I don't think I'll experience it again.
I have to just say to what he just said, to his point about we knew what we were up against. It's really mind blowing when you really think about it, right? How, like, when you look at the facts of this case, right? Like, the facts in terms of if you're the Commonwealth are terrible, right? As
I don't know that we'll ever see it again.
Sorry, I didn't mean to press play. We all know that, like, it's a shit case. Like, they don't have a case. And then you take that and you put that up with against the dreamiest dream team that you could possibly imagine, right? Like, I agree with what Runkle and others have said, that this is even more so than the OJ quote unquote dream team. Like, this was the dream team. And you look at them, you'd have that dream team with all of the help that they had, especially on this round 2. But even on round 1, right, last year, so you're taking a shit case and you're putting it up against the best defense attorneys. The fact that there was still this huge struggle, right? Like, when he says we knew what we were up against, that just goes to show you that equation doesn't make sense. The equation doesn't make sense. So the only answer is the bias, right? And really it comes down to the trial court judge, right? It comes down to the trial court judge. You know, and of course, I guess there may be some fuckery on behalf of, like, in terms of the DA's office. I mean, to me, a lot of the fuckery was just in bringing it in the first place, right? But in terms of when it was actually being tried, you know, you had Green in, you know, pulling out all the stops. But really what it comes down to is the decisions made by the trial court judge in terms of because, in other words, if they had a fair judge that wasn't biased, they would have handled it. They could have there's nothing they couldn't have handled, right? The only thing that really is could make or break it when you're that skilled, and when you have a case that, like here, that is shit, you can put whoever it is on the Commonwealth end in terms of the attorneys, right? They would have handled it. The only thing that at the end of the day was the defining factor was Judge Bev's decisions. So when he says we knew what we were up against, you just have to think about the gravity of that, of like just how biased and corrupt it must be when you look at the shit case and the team of lawyers that you had on the defense side, right? That makes sense. Runkle is still on. He surely is. I think he's reading all the super chats and stuff still. And Bev thought she could cheat and win. And you know what? The thing is, in a way, she did win last year, right? I mean, even down to, like, not letting the jurors express that they had verdicts on counts 1 and 3. Technically, that was a win for her because she was stopping justice from happening, right? I mean, it's wild. Did I hear Alan talk about Bev on Howie Carr? I don't even know who Howie Carr is. So what did he say? I don't know what you mean, Kane, by stepping up your game. Yes, Runkle is the host. Okay. In the top left corner with the elven hair, if you will, like Gandalf, that's Runkle, right? This is his channel. He's the host. He nailed this interview with YANETTI and ALESSI, right? Then you have Mr. YANETTI, right? Karen Reed's OG attorney from day one, literally day one. She called him literally day one. Okay. And then you have at the bottom, of course, Mr. ALESSI, hard as a rock, Mr. Penetrometer, and everybody knows who Mr. ALESSI is, hopefully by now. You mean you're live? I don't know what you're. Oh, my live stream. Oh, are you saying, oh, okay. I think I know what you're saying, Kane. You're saying for me to live stream your live stream? I'm not quite sure. Runkle is the hoe? What? Okay. Yeah, I'll see if I can find that with Alan. I don't know how I haven't seen it. That's crazy. So he got an Alan Jackson interview. Okay. So it's like an audio interview, I guess, for 15 minutes. Kane says, I don't know either. Sorry. That's okay, Kane. That's okay. Oh, I said host, Twiz. Host, not hoe. Come on. So yes. So there's everybody. that's here. And Runkle is one of my favorite people on YouTube. So there's Super Planner Girl. I was just texting with her. Yay, we're glad you're here, Super Planner Girl. Love it. We're just enjoying this interview now that we can pause it and talk about it, since, yeah. Okay.
I had a question that was actually brought to me by one of the aunties, one of the trolls on Twitter, and they don't actually realize how clever.
And by the way, for anyone who didn't know this, Mr. ALESSI was in this chat for several different live streams when it was pre-trial. Like when they were gearing up, they were doing the hearings and stuff, and even just like there were different filings. He was in the chat for like probably 4 or 5 different live streams. He also came into the chat for a Brian Koberger live stream, and he had never heard of the case. He had literally had no idea. And so we were the ones to give him the TLDR on what that case is about and describe it to him. Also, he saw the waterfall music video and he thought it was great. And he also loved his command, which is right here, and thought it was funny. So
it is, because their question was, how do you sleep at night? And the reason why I say it's clever is because I always have trouble, not with the clients you think are guilty. It's the clients that you are certain are innocent. Those are the ones that keep you up at night. So how do you deal with sort of the stress and I guess the burden and the responsibility in a trial like this? How do you just stay sane and keep functional when you're carrying that weight?
Why don't you take that, Bob?
Well, I'm going to let David speak about who sleeps and how they sleep. And
that's true.
I
can. Let me just jump in. I can preface it. Nobody knows this, but Bob ALESSI does not sleep. I've never met anyone in my life who maybe gets 2 or 3 hours of sleep a night, and that is not an exaggeration. He is up, and he loves the law so much. He's working, and he has a full life where he accomplishes so much. He's got a beautiful family. He works out like a madman, and he is the amount of work that he gets done is incredible. He makes everybody else feel like a wimp. And so
now they're going to get into talking about how much he sleeps. See does this remind you of anybody you know?
Know how well he sleeps, but it's not because he's troubled by anything that we've done. I think we're very proud of what we've done.
Yeah, with regard to, I sleep like a baby when I sleep, and as David says, I love practicing law. I said to my family years ago, because they asked me why I did what I did, and I said, I've got unbridled enthusiasm for life. I live on the cusp, and I said specifically, the cusp is unbridled.
You guys, he's literally
enthusiasm.
He's too excited to sleep. That's me all the time.
For life.
Oh my God.
In psychosis, and my my lovely wife Ellen says there's no cusp, it's all psychosis. I enjoy practicing law, and I don't know what it is. I can honestly say I never feel stress. I never know, nothing is it. I'm kind of a mission focused human being, and I probably have a whole bunch of subconscious stress, but when I'm doing what I love to do with people like David Yanetti, who I love working with, I'm just focused on the mission. So to me, those other emotions, etc., for better for worse, don't enter for me.
The other sort of emotional thing I got to ask about is just, what was it like working across from Hank Brennan? I mean, he's a very different style from Lally, but there was a lot of things that just kind of lead me to think he might have been difficult to work with. The jabs. I don't know if it felt like it to you, but it felt like it to me and to many of the people in the chat that he was particularly getting Mr. ALESSI, your name wrong on purpose.
Yeah.
What was it like working sort of, because even though you're opposed, you're still sort of working with somebody to an extent. So what was that like?
David, you want me to take a go at that, or would you like to do it?
No, I'd rather you handle that.
So, what I try to stay away from too much is sort of the personalization of my opponents. This is a wonderful profession, the profession of law. You can do so many good things for clients, for society. And I sometimes look at questions like that, like the office of the president. You may not like who's the president at the current time, but the office is due dignity. And so I sort of look at lawyers that way, and I go in with that presumption. I will say that for my own experience with Attorney Brennan, that for the vast majority of the trial, it was very good. We got along very well professionally. There were a lot of things behind the scenes that we agreed upon with regard to certain evidence, just to make it more efficient. We didn't generally argue over trite things. And that's what I think skilled lawyers have an obligation to the system to do. Toward the end, it got more challenging for a variety of reasons. I think some of which are just obvious. That hoodie sweatshirt incident changed my perspective with regard to a number of matters.
I do find it surprising that it wasn't until then that and he talks more about it, right? Like how much this really changed for him, like how he the like the unspoken rule of having respect for the opposing counsel, right? Like this unwritten rule and like this like camaraderie amongst lawyers, right, and attorneys, and like how this was a turning point for him with the hoodie sweatshirt. I just find it surprising that it took that long. That I mean, to me, it's like there were numerous things where it's like even with the ARCA business, right? Like pre-trial when he was like the whole thing with the same. To me, okay, then we would be here forever, right? Like there were numerous things from a long ass time ago where it's like for me, I would be like, okay, this is where I'm like, he's doesn't have that integrity. Like there's an integrity issue here, right? Like to where you're like, this is like the one attorney that I don't respect, right? Like that's kind of what I end up kind of hearing from ALESSI here, that it's like, it's really hard for him to really lose respect for other counsel. But Breenan managed to achieve that when he got to the hoodie sweatshirt day.
Attorney Brennan was an opponent, and you can code it whatever way you want, but he was the opponent. He's prosecuting our client and asking for liberty and freedom to be taken away forever. And in the end, that's the lens through which I need to view any prosecutor, and especially Attorney Brennan. These charges were unjust. They were unwarranted. In my judgment, at the start of the retrial, once people were able to assimilate the evidence and understand it, my hope, even my expectation, was the top line charge should have been withdrawn, the murder two. It wasn't. There were a lot of dynamics probably extant in the background.
So here's what I hear. If we read between the lines here, what he's saying is, okay, any prosecutor who would bring this case forward and still bring the second-degree murder charge, that's questionable. Like that's questionable. But what he's then saying is, but still, I gave him the benefit of the doubt, and because there's other people in the office, He's like, I gave him the benefit of the doubt with that. Like, in other words, again, it took all the way up until the sweatshirt, where he was like, there was no way around that. Because it's one of those things where it's like you don't want to really fully accept when someone is that scummy, right? And that's what it is. Like he's giving him grace, like what Peter Schrager says. He's giving him grace. He's giving the benefit of the doubt. But when it got to the sweatshirt day, that was a turning point.
I will conclude with regard to Attorney Brennan that he was and is a skilled attorney. That some of the judgments and decisions, albeit he's from a different perspective, I just wish they wouldn't have been made, and I wish some different directions would have been taken. But my job and all of our job is to take what is there. You can hope for something different, but I focused more on this is what's there. That's what's being prosecuted. This is our job. This is our mission. And no matter what came at us, it was our responsibility to find a way to make it work and to make it work for our client.
Well, that is A, it's heartening, and B, a very classy answer. I did want to ask you about the hoodie moment, because that was a major moment in the trial. And for the people in the chat who don't know, Mr. Brennan presented a hoodie and suggested to the witness.
I thought that was hilarious. Oh my God.
On the back of it.
I thought that was hilarious. I literally laughed out loud when he said that, because I'm like, who the fuck would be watching and not know what the hoodie anyway?
Been caused by road rash consistent with a collision. And that was not possible because the origin of the holes was known. It was known to be, from the crime lab. They got those holes. So what was your reactions in that moment? And, do you believe he got up and said, this is an innocent mistake? Do you believe that? Or is that, what's your sort of take on that?
Well, I gave the argument for a mistrial with prejudice on that. I will not repeat. I think probably most of your audience saw it. I will tell you that I was stunned that it occurred. I was disappointed that it occurred. My heart broke for justice at that moment, but it was a millisecond, and then I went into overdrive with regard to combating it.
Wow.
It should never have happened.
I'm going to pause. This is really impactful what he's saying here. I was trying to remember, guys, do you remember when he made his second motion for mistrial? I can't even remember at this point. What was that from? That was not from the x-rays. That wasn't, I mean, I feel like he made that second argument for a motion for mistrial at that was like the same day, but it wasn't because of the x-rays. What was it from? I can't recall.
That it occurred. I was disappointed that it occurred. My heart broke for justice at that moment, but it was a millisecond, and then I went into overdrive with regard to combating it. It should never have happened. It wasn't just one attorney. There were 3 attorneys for the prosecution there.
And they all sat quietly.
And, you know, once we realized what happened, and it wasn't just what happened, it was how it happened.
Oh, thank you.
Where that piece of evidence was at the start of the examination. It wasn't shown to us, as has been the custom, you know, brought over to us. We had a very, very key witness on the stand, Dr. Wolf, on the key issue of whether there was a collision or not. And spoiler alert, there never was a collision. And, you know, it was a key moment. It was toward the end of the trial. And I was very, very disappointed, to say the least, in what happened.
Yeah.
And the fact that after I made the motion for the mistrial with prejudice, the response was, I think I may have made an inadvertent mistake.
Yeah.
That was the second disappointment that I had in that circumstance. And then we argued for a curative instruction.
Oh God, this pissed me off from Judge Bev to no end. You guys heard me.
Have the jury understand, because again, this is a twofer. What happened? Not only
it's crazy,
incorrect.
She never fixed it.
Representation, but it was attacking the credibility of our expert. One of our key experts, Dr. Wolf, is like, why didn't you talk about the holes in the back of the sweatshirt? Why, you know, didn't you do a good job, you know, in your analysis? So it wasn't just the fact that it was an evidence issue. It was attacking the credibility and competence of our expert. And my third disappointment was the curative instruction, notwithstanding of all of our efforts. So that was just another example of the many challenges that we had in this trial, many of which the public never saw because they were addressed at sidebar. But again, my focus and the team's focus was, okay, that has occurred. We did what we needed to do to protect our client, but now we've got to get from where we are, point A, and we got to go to point B to achieve our goal.
You know, I thought about this so oftentimes, right, during this trial. I thought about this all the time, because one thing that was really, I thought, noticeable, or more noticeable this trial than last trial, is how many upsetting, earth-shattering, important decisions were made back to back to back to back, like one after another, right? Like, to me, like, and maybe it's just because I just can't, in lieu of everything that happened this trial, maybe I just don't remember, but like in terms of like how many really important fucking issues came up, right? Where the defense needed to be heard on some issue, you know, even pre-trial, right? But then you had like well, we'd be here for the timeline, right? The Commonwealth changing the timeline. And then, I mean, you could go on and on and on, right? And just all these different issues. And then there were numerous issues towards the end of this. There were so many, I can't even remember them all, but there were so many where Judge Bev didn't even hear argument on stuff. She just didn't even care anymore. She just flat out just started denying stuff without even having argument on it, you know? But it's like, there were so many times during this trial where they would be arguing, right? They'd be making, like for example, with the hoodie thing, right? And the curative instruction, and they would be arguing for something, and she would just flat out shut it down. And it's like, and the thing that was so impressive to me, but I understand why it was the way it was, is because for all of us who are watching it, right, we're like, hold the fuck on, pause it, we have to freak out, oh my God, da 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 da. And it's like, there's a whole response to this of like, how the fuck could this just happen, da da. But for the defense team in real time, it's like they would get shut down on some issue, and then literally 10 seconds later, okay, back to the witness on the stand, you know, and they have to go right back to They cannot stop to take the time to think about what just happened or respond to it. Literally, it's on to plan B. And they had to do that. And that's the thing, because you know what? Imagine if they had let any type of reflection on how biased or unfair or messed up or whatever any of this was, whether it be on behalf of the Commonwealth or whether it be Judge Bev's decisions. Imagine if they let themselves feel or think even a fraction of what us watching thought or felt. It would completely derail their ability to try the case, you know? So it's like the game face, right? It's like they had to keep their head, and they just had to move on. And really, it's kind of a thing of like being in the present moment, right? When that moment, when she made those decisions, and then that moment is over, and now you're on to the next moment, you have to be in that moment and not in the previous one. So anyway.
So let's keep focused on that and not lament unduly, not whine too much. It's like, okay, back on the horse. Let's get back to what we need to do.
And I saw from one of the juror interviews that apparently the jury did pick up on it, especially probably after the closing. They were like, if they're playing fast and loose on this one, how can we trust any of the rest of sort of what they do? I guess that leads into a question I had, which was Brennan's case towards the end of his case it seemed like it started to fall apart. There were several moments when he scored fantastic goals,
own goals
on his own net. Like Dr. Russell, he goes and asks her, and elicits the answer you guys could never have gotten out about the grief response. You guys would never have been able to get that out on direct. He gets out of Dr. Laposada. He gets, there was no collision. What's your sort of thoughts on, like, his performance actually seemed to decline substantially towards the end? Do you have any thoughts on that? Or
I mean, it started to seem like he was actually losing touch with reality. Like, is he like okay in the head? Like, what is going on? Because, like, I don't know. It really, really, really went downhill, and then even to the very end of the closing arguments where he's like trying to say that our theory of the case in terms of the taillight or the collision, it's viable. What? Are you okay?
Agree with that?
Well, all right, I won't let or make Bob do all the heavy lifting here. Ian, as a trial lawyer, I know you understand this. My view is that a trial is a credibility battle. And
here we go.
at a very simple level, it's a credibility battle of the witnesses for each side. Or if one side, if the defense doesn't call a witness, it's focused on witness credibility of the prosecution. Here we did present alternative theories, so the jury has to resolve those and decide who they believe and how much weight to give their testimony. But my view has always been it's a credibility battle between the lawyers as well. And the one thing you don't want to do as a trial lawyer is to promise something and then not deliver. But even more importantly, say something's true and it turns out it wasn't. And so, Bob.
And now, if a lawyer does that, right? The only way they can get away with that is if the jury never learns that the thing wasn't true, right? There's a caveat to that, which is if the lawyer has to say something that they're representing it as true, that they know is not true, but then the jury has to learn that it was not true and that the lawyer misrepresented it, which is what happened with the hoodie. But the jury was never given that type of instruction, like I just referenced. So in other words, it's like Breenan got away with it.
Who is one of the most ethical and moral people I've ever met. I hear when he says he mourned for the lack of justice. That's coming from inside him. That's completely sincere.
Yeah.
For me, when that happened, my immediate thought was, I think he just lost the case. My immediate thought was that was the biggest gift we could have been handed in this trial. I wasn't concerned about, was it intentional? Was it an accident? Who knew about it, etc. The optics were terrible. It allowed Alan in closing argument to, sort of rattle off a litany of stuff that was suspect. The fact that the video at the Sallyport at the Canton police station was inverted and they tried to pass it off as not being inverted. The fact that Dr.
Yeah.
Welcher said there were no
Wild.
x-rays, when lo and behold, there were x-rays. And I think that's why he wasn't recalled as a witness later on. But
100%,
over and above
that's
those,
why. 100%, that's why.
that moment with the sweatshirt, to me, stood out more than anything. And I thought Alan effectively, in the closing argument, isolated it and pointed it out to the jury to get to the conclusion that you just said, which is, if they're not telling the truth about this, then what else are they not telling the truth about? And by the way, doesn't that play into our whole theory of the case?
And it's great. And it's great that Alan did that. And that's the appropriate thing to do. However, there still should have been the proper curative instruction before that. And I'm sure that's what they're about to talk about. So
those are my thoughts.
You know, Ian, you're a very experienced and skilled trial lawyer, and you astutely point out the loss of momentum and the own goals at the end. And you probably noticed a difference from trial one. We focused a lot in this trial on experts and the battle of the experts, and less of he said, she said, who's telling the truth among the fact witnesses, and more the science. And you know, that is my area. And I believe two things to your astute point. The first is I believe, had the better grasp of the science, the data, the physics, the medicine. I think secondly, importantly, we had the better experts. We had the more knowledgeable people, the people who looked at this using the scientific method. You know, people probably heard enough from me about confirmation bias and scientific method, but those are important precepts when you come to experts. I thought our experts discharged themselves fantastically in being in honoring the scientific method and being objective. And I think the jury picked up on that. And to your point of the own goal, I'm not sure how much experience the prosecution had with regard to truly cross-examining experts. I cross-examined every one of the Commonwealth's experts. It's a different world cross-examining experts, as you know from your vast experience.
Now, what's really funny is this was interesting. And I was thinking about this, and I was like, because Breeden is a defense attorney, right? So, and he tries big cases ostensibly. So he makes a great point, because the way Breeden cross-examined the experts, it's as if he didn't have that experience. But how is that possible, right? Like, Breeden should have tons of experience cross-examining experts. So it's odd to me. Oh,
it's a different world. It's a different skill set. It's a different approach.
Busy.
And if you don't do it the way that is merited by the situation, you can end up with double-digit owned goals. And I think that happened.
I thought it was actually quite striking to see some of the differences, both in the quality of experts, because watching the trial, like, really the prosecution expert who I might want to call was Dr. Wolf. If I was sitting here making a list of, like, who out of this list would I bring on a trial of mine, Dr. Wolf I'd have no problem with, but he was also a big problem because he straight up said, we see this all the time. Somebody falls and this injury and they die.
Clear, because there's more than one Dr. Wolf. He's talking about the neurosurgeon, right? The Commonwealth's only expert witness that actually was credible and whatever. So he was the Commonwealth's expert that was not on the stand for very long, but was extremely, like what Runkle just said, he would have hired him to bring him on for a case or what have you. But again, offered that opinion that the head injury looks just like when someone just falls over for any reason and just hits their head on the ground or whatever. And clearly Breeden was not expecting that answer.
And I went, oh, wow, Brennan, did you not even have a conversation with this guy? But
just piggybacking on your comment, Ian, the brilliance of Bob ALESSI in terms of his cross-examination of Dr. Wolf, it was one of the most unorthodox starts to a cross-examination that you will see, but it was ingenious and it was done for a reason. It was very clear that their Dr. Wolf was a brilliant man, a very experienced witness, and very confident, and he was going to be a big challenge to cross-examine. But if you'll remember, Bob started his cross-examination by introducing himself, saying it's a pleasure to meet you, and tell me about your normal day. And Dr. Wolf was an experienced witness, and he was happy to
Now, it's really funny because when we watched this, right, and I think that might have been one of the times when I was streaming it live as it was happening. But anyway, literally, I was like, I know exactly why he's asking this. Like, I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was great. And I loved that we got to hear about how he makes his wife the coffee drink and all that. But I knew exactly why he was asking the question, right? But apparently Dr. Wolf didn't see it coming. And that's what YANETTI's going to say here.
what he does during the day, including, getting up early and making his wife coffee. And these seem to be the softball questions. And, Bob extended that day into a week, I think. And it was only at that point that, having completely set him up, invited him for dinner and put the plate in front of him, that Dr. Wolf realized the food was actually poison. Because that's when Bob struck, if you recall, and said, geez, that your day is fascinating and you're doing important work, but I didn't hear anything about forensic pathology, which is the topic that he was called on to testify to, And I think at that point, Dr. Wolf realized he had been had, and he got a little angry on the stand and said, well, you could have just asked me if I'm a forensic pathologist. I'm not. But in facing such, he was probably the most difficult witness, or the most formidable witness for us to cross-examine in the whole trial. And I thought it was just brilliant the way he handled that.
Yeah, a good expert witness is very difficult to cross. And one of the questions I have for you, Bob, is just, if you don't mind me calling you Bob, is how do you manage to learn? Because you were coming in and at point correcting the experts, and didn't you just use the wrong term? And they'd be like, "Oh, sorry, yes, I did." You had to cover like 6, 7, 8 different fields in order to be good enough that you can, that the experts sort of also recognize you as an expert, which we didn't see with Brennan. Brennan's trying, and they're like, "No, you're like a kid in the sandbox." How do you possibly do that?
Well, the first part of the answer is I just love learning. I always have. I went to pharmacy school before law school, so I had every chemistry, physics, calculus known to man, and I enjoyed all of it except for calculus. I never enjoyed it. But I just enjoy learning. I enjoy technical STEM type issues, and I'll stay up all night to read about them and to learn them.
And I literally thought to myself, again, this is just reminds me so much of myself, where it's like, I literally thought to myself, the other thing is when you are too excited to sleep, and so you don't sleep very much, you have way more time than other people to learn stuff, Yeah.
It's a joy for me to do. I have in my career, like the best experts, I feel like I get mini master's degrees just by working with brilliant people. And the fact that I don't sleep much allows me to have about 1.7 times a life than others. So I get more time to prepare. It's like the person who takes the exam gets extra time. That's me. And
I'm envious.
I just enjoy it. When you enjoy what you're doing, you're gonna learn. And God gave me a little bit of facile with some technical issues and great experts to work with, and also a great team. It's when you got a team like the team we had, that I don't know if it will ever be repeated. What happens is I'm doing that. I'm in a nerding out with stuff I love, because David YANETTI has got some very heavy witnesses. And let me make a point clear. Some of the very heavy witnesses that just didn't end up testifying, David YANETTI had, right? And so I can be confident that when I'm diverted all my time and in my, technical bubble with all these experts, that I've got Boston's best criminal defense attorney on the other things. So in sum, it's me doing what I like to do. And my background allows me maybe to do it slightly better than other attorneys, but also knowing all the time I'm myopically focusing in on that. I've got other team members like David YANETTI who are at the top of their game on the other.
He's saying it's just a luxury because he wants to be able to nerd out on this stuff, but he could only have done it because he had other attorneys that were doing the other heavy lifting for the other stuff. It's a great point. And I love that with every question that I think this entire time that is asked about Mr. ALESSI on how he's something that would be like, he's good at this, or how does he do that? Things that could be complimentary of him. With every single answer, his answer includes, it's possible because of Mr. YANETTI, or it's possible because of Mr. YANETTI and the other people. Like, he doesn't, he can't take credit for it because it's only because of other people's. I mean, talk about humble, right? Humility. I mean, it's just, I guess it's really interesting, right? Because
good team construction and team dynamics.
I keep hitting the play thing accidentally. What I was going to say is that it's really interesting because we've seen how he operates as an attorney, right? And we know that he's so smart, and I think you can get a sense of who he is. But this is really interesting because what we end up learning so much here is we get a lot as to his philosophies on life, it's really, really, really cool to really get the full picture of what he's like as a person, and YANETTI as well. So.
That really synergizes. into many other salutary aspects of practicing law.
Yeah, and of course, I would add that Bob mentions the team, and I'm here, and I certainly appreciate the kind words. But Alan Jackson and Liza Little were, I think, about as tireless as Bob was. And before I get to Alan, if you don't mind me just saying a few words about the other members of the team.
Oh, I was actually going to get to that, so I'm glad you
Good. Yeah, I mean, Liza was really the unsung hero of the team to me. And I know Alan would say the same thing. He always does. In the last trial, we only had 3 attorneys, and my goodness, we had so many more witnesses. We were drinking from a fire hose for 4 months, and it was horrific. And bringing on Bob took such a load off us, and then having 8 interns that we didn't have last time took such a load off us, so that we could really try this case the right way. It was really a luxury. But Liza was in on every witness. She is a brilliant attorney, and tireless. Her writing is some of the best legal writing you'll get in the country. She was all in, and everybody knows about Alan. I mean, a phenomenal trial lawyer. Strengths that very few lawyers have, in my estimation. I think just a wonderful cross-examiner, has a facility for it. I feel as though I learned something very valuable from every member of this team. And I've even learned from the interns in terms of the one that, they crafted the verdict slip, and they really had a great perspective, including the Evan Wolk, who manned the video machine for us. He's also a BC.
I loved that. So Mr. Wolk was an intern.
Law student, and he was just phenomenal.
Amazing.
I was actually quite impressed because there was a substantial difference in that, because you'd be able to, I watched, your side, and you'd just be like, Mr. Wolk, and he'd have it up, right? And it would just be seamless. And Mr. Brennan didn't have that. He would often have to have he'd break his cross-examination to have a little conversation with his staff. And I actually kind of felt bad that Brennan didn't have the team in the same way. But I guess, what do you think of Lally's role in this? Because Lally was the guy in trial 1, and in trial 2, you barely see him, and it's sort of only on very inconsequential matters. Is there sort of a feeling there as to sort of how that was working, or do you comment on that?
So I'm willing to say this, which is, I've done criminal law my whole career. I was an assistant DA for 10 years handling these cases, and then I've been a defense attorney for 25. I've had a lot of experience dealing with opposing criminal counsel, and almost without exception, I developed some type of relationship with opposing counsel.
I love this.
I fight really hard within the courtroom, but outside of the courtroom, I don't take any of it. And I'd be just as quick to go out to dinner with somebody than to shun them.
I love this part. This is where they starts detailing the friendship that him and ALESSI have, and I love this so much.
Trial.
Love and romance.
I didn't. I've now known Adam Lally for 3.5 years, but I put known in quotes. I never really got a feel for him. He wasn't really interested in small talk or getting to know me in any way, and it could be because we took such an aggressive approach with his office. And I don't know that he took it personally. I didn't really see any evidence of that. I think he was just there doing his job. But to me, he didn't seem interested in more than doing his job. So to answer your question,
that does not surprise me at all, you guys, with Lolly. Basically, he's described Lolly is like what you see is what we saw is what you get. Like, there is nothing else there. There's no I'm paraphrasing, right? But in other words, there's no personality. It's like he just shows up and does his job and then leaves. It's like an AI person maybe, or something, like a robot. I don't know. But this doesn't surprise me at all. That is totally the read that I get on Lolly still, right?
I don't know what he was thinking, because I really don't know the man. I think he was put in a very difficult position, right? I mean, he was the guy in trial number 1, and he basically did. I think he did every witness. I don't think Laura McLaughlin took one witness last time. And you're right. This time he was not the guy. I think from all appearances, I thought that he behaved professionally. He didn't seem like he was whining or sulking or anything like that. But I can't really speak beyond that.
Bland personality.
One of the big decisions and one of the huge sort of moments was you guys decided not to call Trooper Proctor. I know there was a fight over, getting, and you guys did great work on, getting Proctor's texts in and so forth. But there was the decision not to call, and this was probably the most contested decision among sort of the law tube community. And so, can you talk about sort of that decision and like why that was, why that was made? What was the thinking there?
You go, Bob.
Yeah, we can't speak much about that issue, as I'm sure you can imagine. It is one of the questions, so you asking it is perfectly understandable. There was, as you can imagine, considerable discussion about that topic, but not unfortunately able to go into the strategy behind it. But I will say something. There were significant evidentiary battles as a result of our decision not to call Proctor. And there were several attempts by the prosecution to try to force us to call former Trooper Proctor. And that was a fight that went on pretty much through the whole trial. And credit David YANETTI, because it was two parts, not calling him, but then how do we get the texts into evidence as to what he said? That was an epic battle, evidentiary wise. David YANETTI ultimately won that battle for the defense. We got those texts in, and those texts were used at closing. Now, some people in social media and other areas may not believe that the impact from merely reading them as opposed to seeing former Trooper Proctor on the stand was what they had perhaps hoped for. I have a completely different review, respectfully, than those folks. I believe and am very, very comfortable with the decision we made. I was comfortable at the time with what we made. I was very comfortable with the effectuation, but the effectuation happened because of David's mastery of the evidence to get those to be read. So in conclusion, understand the interest in it. It was a big part of trial one, but that was part of, Ian, a larger universe of us coming at trial two differently. And that was really just part of the difference, and albeit to some a large part of it. But thanks to David, we got the evidence in.
The one thing I would add to that, not talking about our specific case, I think I can generalize it more. And I think this is a very interesting issue, which is I've tried other third-party culprit cases where the defense has been that somebody else did it. I can think of two off the top of my head, I should say, that I've tried as a defense attorney, and several as a prosecutor earlier in my career. But based on my experience, and perhaps it's anecdotal, but I feel very strongly about this. Based on my experience, when the prosecution is able to present to the jury the third-party culprit, they increase their chances of winning the case. That's how I feel. And if they fail to present the third-party culprit to the jury, they tend to lose the case. And my thinking on that is that when there's an allegation against a third-party culprit, even if it's in the context of a Bowden issue, Bowden being the Massachusetts case that talks about the failure of the police to properly investigate, it's all the same. If you're pointing the finger at someone else, and the jury never sees them or hears from them, never hears their tone of voice, sees their facial expression, never gets to size them up in the way that they size up every other witness, it's much easier to make that person the boogeyman to the jury. And in this case, I felt like we had really three boogeymen. We had Trooper Proctor with those text messages. We had Brian Albert, who didn't come out of his house, and we had Brian Higgins, who really looked nefarious in this trial in a way that he did not in the last trial. And the boogeymen were humanized to a degree in trial one. Adam Lally put everybody on. Boy, it was tedious.
It was.
But there is an argument to be made that perhaps that was the better strategy if you were prosecuting the case.
He got to a hung jury.
Well, yeah, true. I mean, I suppose the proof's in the pudding there. And of course, our defense was different too this time. But we did feel like that we were in better shape going into the closing arguments in this trial than the last one.
I actually, that's an issue that I came around on, because my initial thought on it was actually, I was like, you've got to get Proctor. What are they doing? And it was, it was partially just the text and the moment where like Proctor's good friend was unwilling to read them. I actually thought that should have made it. That was one of my minor criticisms of Jackson's closes. I would have put in a line along the lines of, and his good friend won't even repeat these, these messages. They're so foul that he, but the other thing that sort of brought me around on that was watching him cross-examine Deaver.
Don't call her Deaver.
Oh God.
She might appear as a fourth cube if you do that, Ian.
Exactly.
But just watching her and watching Brennan like feed her excuses under the guise of cross-examination, it's like, here's an excuse. Isn't that true? Yes. I really came around on that one, and I went, it's a much better decision, I thought, to not have him up, to let Brennan try to rehabilitate him. And I mean, if Brennan's trying that hard to make you call him, why doesn't he just call him himself? Because he can't, if you call it, or if he calls him himself, he can't do that strategy. It's
well, I called him out on that when we were arguing about whether we had to call Proctor or not. I finally just revealed it in open court during an argument. I was like, we should not have to call Trooper Proctor so that Mr. Brennan can make his closing argument during cross-examination in our case, right? I mean, I didn't think it was a close call.
Did you think Dever was going to be as much of a tire fire as she was?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, I'm going to take this opportunity because sometimes lawyers give too long answers on these types of programs. I'm just going to agree with David on that one.
I was stunned at just how bad of a witness she was, and I mean, if I'm a defense lawyer in that town, I'm taking notes just for every other trial she gets up to. It's like, oh, so you're prone to false memories, are you? Mm-hmm. Couldn't this allegation be a false memory?
Mm-hmm.
To your point that I think pervades a lot of things, I hope the jury concluded, and I hope your viewers and other people watching concluded, that the defense genuinely tried to put on witnesses that were honest, were their experts, they followed science and the scientific method, and that we just presented the jury with as sort of, yes, we have a job to do and we're biased for our client, but try to be honest brokers of the truth. Try to be the ones that facilitate the truth to the jurors so they can make the best decision possible. And I'm very, very proud of our team and the witnesses we put on. And although I was very close, obviously, to the matter being in the courtroom, I really saw a big contrast with the witnesses we put on and the witnesses for the prosecution. And I think she was just one of the paradigmatic examples of that contrast.
That and Burgess. How did you find Burgess's resume fudging? Like, what was the research process for that?
Yeah, we had internal and external help on that, is the most I will say. And I will tell you that for purposes of my cross-examination of Mr. Burgess, I had maybe 4 questions in my thought process for him, and it just blossomed into almost a full half to 3/4 of a day based upon his answers and based upon some other factors. But it was an internal and external diligence process. And just the more that you kept peeling back that onion, the more jaw-dropping it became. And I also thought just how the cross-examination developed was almost equally jaw-dropping.
I actually compare and contrast that with Brennan taking his run at Dr. La Posada, because there was the big argument about, can we get in the the fire and those things. And then when he takes his big run, like, the judge allows all that in against objections and so forth, and he takes his big run and she just answers honestly and shuts him down, versus Burgess, who drags it out into a full-on thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, that says that, tremendous credit, because you guys you guys found experts. And I mean, Aperture is supposed to be a company that delivers like reliable experts, and they did not come out looking good here. I guess, how do you feel about, well, I guess I'll ask, Welcher had a number of points that weren't addressed on cross, but were addressed with follow-up witnesses, like the X-rays and the lean in and so forth. Was there a plan for like how to deal with, I'm just wondering, like, how much of that was waiting for rebuttal on that?
Great question. The short answer is three parts to the answer. First is I determined what I wanted to go after him on cross. I had no idea that he was going to be the type of witness that he turned out to be. I'm always prepared for everything, but I had no idea he would do things to the extent that he
was
did.
really a
So when you
unique one,
see
wasn't
somebody doing that, you've got to adjust. You know, you just can't say, I'm going to just keep following my plan, especially with experts, you know, or really any witness, but particularly experts. You got to palpitate the situation and pivot as needed. And so I saw what Welcher was doing. I put my crumbs in on my physics with force equals mass times acceleration. In fact, he did it with the head, but not the arm, which is a cardinal sin for a biomechanist. If you're not going to use Newton's second law and you're going to try to do a kindergarten pain experiment. Well, we knew the kindergarten pain experiment was what he was relying upon. But after seeing what he was doing, you saw me come back differently on day 2 with him. So part 1 was just get what you can out of him. Then day 2 was to let the jury know day 1 isn't going to happen again. We're not going to torture you through that. Let him do what he did the first day. So now it's a different approach. It's more efficient. It's more pointed, and knowing how he's going to try to obscure the truth. And then the part 3, as you again astutely identify, was given how part 1 and part 2 went, don't try to force out of him things that he's just going to either be mendacious about, be obstructive, and just get it from other witnesses. And that's just, you know, what trial lawyers do that do it the right way, is just realize what's in front of you. And there was an extraordinarily conscious effort to come back at through our witnesses. As you saw, we went through the physics with ARCA much clearer. And then also lastly, with regard to, I give you one example. I don't know if you remember the slide in Dr. Welcher's report at the end, where it was this person who didn't apparently have a broken arm from the accident, him trying to show, oh, hey, here's an example where somebody went 24 miles an hour and got hit by a motor vehicle and didn't have a broken arm. Well, lo and behold, we had, and I knew that, and I initially intended to cross him on that, but I knew the bizarre things he would say. So I just decided I'm going to go with Dr. Russell on that and have her explain it. And I think your viewers know the rest, that we just went through and said how that's nothing like our situation. So in sum, Ian, that's an example of palpitating the situation, pivoting, and yes, it was completely conscious, all of it in a plan to bring it up when we wouldn't have the clunkiness that exuded from him, because he just wouldn't be a scientist and a truth teller on the stand.
Yeah, he was a mess.
And is that what happened to like
Bye.
Brennan throughout the
Love
trial,
you,
was
clients.
promising,
Love you.
I'm going to have this person on rebuttal, I'm going to have that person on rebuttal, sometimes to actually get things out of the court. Like, I can ask about the DNA because I'm bringing the DNA back. And then his rebuttal was, I have no rebuttal, like, which is a weird ending. So do you have any thoughts on the like complete lack of rebuttal?
I do. I mean, I was the one that was going to handle everyone, cross-examine every one of his rebuttal witnesses. Just as a selfish, personal matter, I was extraordinarily disappointed he didn't call them. I was very much looking forward to it. But for our client, it was a good thing. I could give you many reasons, some of which, unfortunately, would be self-laudatory as to why he didn't call them, and I won't do that. I will just say that we were very, very much ready for every one of his rebuttal witnesses, and I believe the lopsidedness would have been pronounced. I believe Attorney Brennan recognized that almost as much as we did. He kept the specter, though, of those rebuttal witnesses almost as sort of a faux sort of Damocles he thought was over our head. And I don't know if he knew, but we were thirsting to have that occur. Only he knows best why he didn't call them. But I can tell you, we were very confident as to what was going to happen. And as insubstantial as the ending of his case was, I believe it would have been much more insubstantial had he called even one, let alone all of those rebuttal witnesses.
And I think that was so funny is Brennan himself didn't volunteer that information that they're not going to have a rebuttal. He waited. It wasn't until literally they were like finishing out the schedule for the last couple of days. It wasn't until Judge Bev asked him, how long for your rebuttal, that he said, oh, well, we're not doing it. So just so gross.
I was actually somewhat disappointed when he didn't call a rebuttal witness, because I was chomping at the bit for Welcher to come back and have to explain all of the things that had been set up. You know, okay, now you're back. Why don't you have the
I wanted
X-rays?
to see Welcher come back and get
either Brennan didn't give him the X-rays or he lied to the court about having the X-rays. Either answer is awful. He'd have to explain like the lean in. I was waiting for all of that. And then Brennan is like, we better not do that. I think my suspicion is that Brennan realized he'd been so efficiently boxed out of being able to come back with that there's no way you can make Welcher come back and look good. There's just
he was not going to get the bang for his buck. Whatever interest he had in eliciting further information, the cross-examination was going to overwhelm it. And
I said I wouldn't bring up super chats, but I might occasionally, Bob ALESSI won't be self-laudatory. I'll laud him. I also regret the loss of rebuttal cross. Ref might have had to stop it. Yep.
That's very true.
Andrea is also a boxer, so she knows everything about the ref having to stop it. So can
I just say something about Andrea? Like you, Ian, she is an incredibly talented and astute lawyer.
100%.
You two just have extraordinary skills and natural instincts with regard to the law. And I will just say that Andrea Burkhart and Ian Runkle, when they say something, it's very much worth listening to.
Oh, thank you. I'm blushing, and I'm sure Andrea is as well. I had a question. Was there a particular piece of evidence that, because there was a whole lot you guys had, and there's places where like I was watching the arguments and I'm just like, I want this in.
I wish.
But for you guys, was there a particular sort of, if you had to pick sort of one thing you really wanted to get into or to address that you couldn't? Is there sort of something that comes to mind? Or
number one for me, ARCO was hired by the Department of Justice. Yeah. That was number one for me. That was the third rail. I don't know. Does that term make sense to somebody from Canada? Do you know what the third rail is?
We've got some base.
I didn't know if it was just a
I have no idea what the third rail is. Do you guys?
Term, but anyway, that was off limits. That was off limits from the moment it was mentioned to the judge that the federal investigation existed, and we received the information that we did, right up until the end of the trial. No, I think we got the sense, no matter what happened, that we would argue open the door for that discussion. She was not going to let us go there, and she didn't. So in light of the verdicts that we got, all's well, and I don't lose any sleep over that at all. But boy, it would have been sweet for the jury to have heard that. And I thought, maybe I'm wrong. I'm not a judge, and maybe there's a reason for that. But I thought that was very relevant information. The jury should have known the genesis of how they came into the case, and we had to do it this trial by process of elimination. That's how we got that in. In the last trial, we had feedback from jurors. I'm sure you saw this, that some of them thought that ARCO was hired by Karen's insurance company, which that impacts their credibility in a real negative way, right?
It's not just me that saw it. Brennan saw it too. And the way I know that is because he directly asked, so you get hired by insurance companies, right? And then followed that up with, is there a reason why you didn't want to tell the jury that you get hired by, what's the jury going to think? And then we don't get to know what's in sidebars, but tell me if I'm wrong here. The sidebar immediately following that, I'm sure, was, isn't this door open?
So that's something that we can't speak to. The sidebars have all been sealed. So
fair enough.
But judges instruct juries all the time that they can use deductive reasoning and draw inferences. So I will allow the fact finders here to draw their own inferences.
I thought that was blowing the door open. I was sitting there going, they have to let the FBI in at this point, because the jury, it's been directly suggested. And the other thing is that just sort of strikes me about this one is that if it's relevant, if they were hired by an insurance company, it's also got to be relevant to whoever else hired them. If it bears on their credibility in any way. But I mean, I'm not.
You've persuaded me.
We got a good verdict on it.
Oh, I freaking doubt it. I doubt it.
Prosecution got to use that as a sword and a shield, and unfairly so, which I think, Ian, is one of your points. I'll tell you quickly my piece of evidence that's on the top of my list is the alternative theory as to what happened, namely that Mr. O'Keefe was not injured and was not killed at where he was located. That was someplace else, and we had solid medical and other evidence, and we were not allowed to proffer even the evidence, let alone push the theory.
It's so insane that they couldn't even proffer it. That's insane.
And, you know,
Absolutely
isn't
insane.
that a fundamental
Yeah.
Sixth Amendment right,
It
your
is.
constitutional right to
Yep.
a defense?
Sure is.
Inherent in your constitutional right to a defense is the ability to put forth an alternative theory to that of the prosecution. And we had tremendous evidence backed by facts, backed by experts, and we were not allowed to go there. I wasn't even allowed to go there in my cross-examination of Dr. Scordi Bello, the medical examiner, who couldn't determine the manner of death. So why then wasn't it a minimum that I could pursue those questions, and I was not allowed to do so? That, I think, was an unfortunate situation, but that stuck out for me.
One of the moments that stuck out for me in hindsight, I guess, is that, and the chat will not forgive me if I don't ask this, the photos that Turtle Boy has tweeted out of the garage. And I sort of can rewind directly to where that would have been. The question of, so, you know, I want to ask, you know, is this going, you know, is this consistent with the, you know, the mark on the head? Was that sort of part of where you wanted to go with that, with, you know, the photos there?
Unfortunately, that's another area that Ian Runkle ends up asking a tremendously good question, but we can only compliment the question and not begin an answer.
And for the people in the chat, lawyers are stuck with rules, and sometimes we end up with all sorts of, you know, things. So please do not hold anything against them. It's just the nature of the profession. And I entirely encouraged them before we got on, like, if there's a question and you can't answer it, don't. So please do not. This is a sign of ethical lawyers. So I know it's frustrating sometimes with chats, but it is what it is. What did you guys think about the moment where they tried to get Karen Reed's communications in through Turtle Boy, or tried to get a hold of them through Turtle Boy? And there's that whole like movie badass moment as suddenly like the doors open and lawyers file in at the 11th hour to go, we object. Like, what were your thoughts when that was going down and when you're having to respond to that?
I will tell you that we were downstairs in a big jury room in the courthouse, and we had a bunch of folks in there, and we were live streaming what was going on in that courtroom. And then we started.
Bob, let me interrupt you. Explain why we were in that room.
Talking about, for anyone who doesn't remember, this was pre-trial, right? This is that epic moment. I made a little video about it, right? Where they come in and it's like so super epic. That was what, 2 weeks maybe before trial started, maybe longer.
David, please.
Well, we walked into the courthouse and we wanted to go up to the courtroom, and we were diverted by a court officer to say, there's a hearing going on upstairs. You guys wait in this, you know, conference room. So I'm sorry I interrupted, but I think that's an important piece to this.
This is just another example of my stellar co-counsel being an excellent co-counsel. It's an important point to make sure we start with. So with that, we are then in this diverted room, and I can't remember who it was on the team, just decided to start live streaming, and we watched, and then we were like, did they really ask that question? That involves and it implicates our client. Then the next one, and then all of a sudden someone said, we got to get up there. And so,
well, and Bob, but you're also you left out. We learned that the case upstairs, the name of that case was Commonwealth versus Karen Reed, and I mean, our hair just spontaneously combusted and lit on fire. And Bob led the charge upstairs. You could see how fast he entered that courtroom.
Yeah, I was basically like, we're going up, and I don't know if my feet ever touched the ground from that room. And then, of course, there's court officers outside the door, right? You just can't walk in, and I'm going court proceeding. So I kind of like flew up the stairs, and the team was right with me. And then I see the court officers, and it's like, okay, Bob, you got to bring it down a notch. You got to walk professionally. You can't like run at them. And so I slowed the pace down. I went and I somewhat calmly said to the court officer outside the door, I said, excuse me, Officer X. And I know the name. I'm just trying to protect them because they did us a tremendous favor.
They're doing their job. They're not, you know,
And so I said, there's a proceeding going on in there that we've learned is about our client, and there are statements made about our client. I said, we need to be in that room now. And to that officer's credit, he goes, okay, Mr. ALESSI, I understand. Let me just check. So I believe, I don't know, he probably went and checked with whomever was the court officer in charge. Next thing you know, he opens up the door, and you saw the rest.
I was just
Yeah,
watching it, and yeah,
I just want to add, yeah, my comment about the court officers telling us to remain downstairs. I am not alleging that they did anything that they shouldn't have done. I think it was just a directive trying to control traffic or whatever. I think it was an innocent explanation, and the court officers treated us great during this trial. So I'm just thinking to myself, is somebody going to take that the wrong way? And I just want to go on record with that.
That was very
I
admirable.
actually thought the court officers did a tremendous job,
They
like
did.
just watching this, because
They did.
I mean, that's a tiny courthouse or courtroom. It's a difficult scenario. There's a lot of, without casting aspersions at anybody, there's a lot of tension among people who want to be, present. And there was very little, like, I didn't hear really, aside from like one instance, that's sort of a minor thing. I didn't hear of any conflict between like the families. It just was very, very smooth and orderly. So I was quite impressed.
Oh yeah, they did a great job keeping control of that courtroom and really keeping control of the whole trial. They really did a commendable job in my view.
Yeah, those court officers were absolutely stellar. I could probably list them all by first name. They would greet you professionally. Every once in a while, we just have an interpersonal conversation. Your daughter plays softball. You watch Curb Your Enthusiasm. Oh, I just started watching it.
I thought that was hilarious because that's one of my favorite shows, and we talk about it quite often here. And in fact, we were watching it in the Discord recently too. Isn't that so funny?
These are human beings with a very, very difficult job and a very important job. And they were just stellar in every regard. And it started when you entered the courtroom and went through the machine. Melissa, Abby, they were all fantastic. And, entering a courtroom for something of these stakes, to have a humane and professional environment sets the tone for everything else that's going to happen in that courtroom. So total tip of the hat to the court officers.
And how do you feel that social media and sort of, I guess, new media, which I guess includes me, but, Turtle Boy and just Twitter in general, affected this trial?
Two answers to that. Number one, I don't have any evidence that jurors were paying attention to social media, and they answered those same three questions the same way every day. So I think we have to take them at their word. I will say that we paid general attention to social media, and if we didn't, it was pointed out to us. And there were, I won't say advice, but there was information on social media that we wound up using to our advantage during this trial. There are a lot of smart people out there watching this case, and we have, I think, 3 smart lawyers and Dave in a conference room, working through it as well. But the addition of these people who were so invested in our defense and trying to help out and sort of seeing things from a different perspective, it benefited us.
Yeah, I want to build on what David said quickly and just say, in the type of cases I try, and I'm fortunate to try some heavy high-stake cases, I call them sort of like COVID cases. Remember COVID? There were the big basketball games or football games, big games on, and you look in the audience and there's nobody there. So, when I'm trying, like, whatever, a trademark case or patent, whatever it is, you don't have this much attention for these cases. So social media's impact on a case, this was a little bit new for me. And so I have a large firm and we've got a social media team, and they were monitoring what was going on. And in some ways, it's just writ large of the jury. It could be representative. So 2 functions to me were, as David said, the information
exactly
we were getting.
Peter Tragosoul says, right? Like when you've got a lot of people, like the way he has in his chat or whatever, it ends up being a good representation of potentially what a jury is thinking,
Just some great ideas and some great thoughts, but also sort of a barometer. Are we landing what we're trying to do? And I haven't had that benefit from many trials. Is not that it's statistically significant all the time, but I will also say, lastly, that I didn't have much time to do it, but I will tell you, I would tune into Ian Runkle and see what he had to say and see what his thoughts were. I would tune into Andrea Burkhardt, Peter Tragos, the defense diaries, these 2 detectives, forensic detectives, Ron and Paul, whoever they are. I would tune into them. Ted Daniel, what's he hearing out on the street?
Well, it's really funny because when this was happening live, I was like, oh my God, is he going to say our channel, right? Because he's been here before. However, he's talking about tuning in during the trial, And the only times that he was here in the chat, it was several times, but it was pre-trial. He was never, at least he wasn't, okay. He could have been watching and not in the chat, right? For example, he's saying he would tune in to Ian Runkle. He definitely wasn't in the chat, right? So in other words, I don't know. I guess we can't say for sure. But it was just funny because I was like, oh my God, is he going to mention this channel? Because like, he was here. So anyway.
And I could go on and on and on. The brother council. There's just so many. And to me, it was just like.
Why is it so delayed pausing?
A big library. I didn't have time to read all the books, but sometimes I would pick up some. And so I think, I'll speak for myself. Social media gave me more tools and more information, and I'm very grateful. And I am completely impressed with the level of astuteness and intelligence out there.
Did you notice a difference in sort of, I guess, vibe between like the commentary online versus the commentary from like mainstream media and some of the more institutional, I guess, media?
Oh, completely. And I'm going to give an excuse for mainstream traditional media that they may not deserve, but they are soundbite news people, right? They have 30 seconds a minute. And and the more modern, if you will, podcasters, YouTubers, lawtubers, you just get more extended conversations, right? So the vibe to me is there's a greater depth with regard to what I call the more modern media. And I will say, unfortunately, and I hope I don't have an undue bias, I just thought the mainstream media wasn't accurately reporting what really the facts were, where the case was going. I just didn't get the sense, with one exception, or maybe two exceptions, that, it was more than just a vibe. It was, they were maybe trying to manufacture a vibe that just really wasn't represented by the facts. So my perspective was, I really think that because of the beauty of Ian, what you and your colleagues in your industry do, you're not able to do that. You're going to have somebody with a super chat or some other they're going to come right at you. So I just like the whole vibe of the check and balance that exists in the more modern atmosphere. And, you got to go on and face everybody on your shows, whereas some executive producer at your major network, they're not accountable, right? Point. And they can push a narrative, or they can maybe keep soundbitey. And so for all those reasons, I think there is a different vibe. And one of the reasons why, and David, of course, will speak for himself, is we're on your show and we'll probably be on other shows, is because I just think the vibe you give people is pretty simple.
He mentioned being on other ones. Oh my God, you guys can come here anytime you want. Not that, well, anyway, they can come here anytime they want, obviously. Come here.
Accuracy. It's more accurate.
And the other thing I'll just say, I've been a criminal defense lawyer for ages. And, you go to a party and you always get what I call the party question. It's somebody who's up in your face about how can you possibly do that? And one of the things I've seen change, a number of people in my chat have said, hey, I never thought that I'd have heroes who were criminal defense lawyers.
Yeah.
Like that to me is such a huge change. And that's you guys. Like that is, and I know you're saying I'm not going to, toot my own horn, but you guys really are like legitimate heroes in a way that, I guess it's hard to sort of explain to the average person, the sense of like, you guys actually were in a situation where you saw somebody in trouble and stepped in, many of you with like, not just no financial interest, but like at a loss, and were able to like, I have some skills, I have some, and I'm going to, step up. I guess, you guys, how does it feel sort of to be that, that sort of hero to many, many people nowadays?
So can I take the first crack at that, Bob? Yeah, I mean, I would give some pushback that where anything special in terms of being heroes or that
the answer from him doesn't surprise me, because obviously these people are amazing, and so that would include being humble. This doesn't surprise me. In fact, the fact that they're so humble about it is part of why they are even more. That makes them like even more heroic, if you will, like even bigger role models, even bigger heroes than they would have been. Because if they'd been like, whatever, cocky about it, people would have been like, well, fuck that, right? and I mean, obviously they're just being completely genuine. They're just, I don't know. It's just so funny, right? Because they really are. I mean, what they've done is so huge for the justice system beyond our, let's say, it's like huge for us as individuals, but also just the justice system, and just for, it has a lot of bigger implications. But their humility about it is just so, I just appreciate it. So.
That there's something unique about us. I don't think that's the case. I think that this team is talented and dedicated and generally smart, despite my inclusion on the team. But I think that there are a lot of other attorneys who could do what we do. If you came down, Ian, and you were hired for this case, you would have stepped in seamlessly. And there are a lot of other attorneys who would do the same thing. So I look at it more as we were doing our job, and we were incredibly fortunate to have a case that galvanized the public because everyone recognized the injustice. So, it wasn't, it certainly makes me feel so good that I was representing someone in whom I saw her innocence and I saw the injustice, and maybe I was able to help out in some small way in terms of trying to correct that. But I don't buy into this. All of a sudden I'm something special. I don't feel that way. I feel like I did my job. And the second aspect of this is that putting that aside, it's surreal to be in this situation. Surreal. I don't know if you probably never got down to the courthouse. You just saw the videos outside because you're so far away.
We could hear the roar from inside the courtroom camera.
My goodness. I mean, to have adoring public clamoring for your attention or some type of connection. I'm not used to that. I'm not somebody that seeks out that limelight. If I'm at a party, I'm generally in a corner having a private conversation as opposed to working the crowd. I think the other members of my team may have a little different perspective, but I so appreciated being in this position. I had such love for everybody that showed up. I mean, I was blown away by the people that would take time out of their day and wait for us to come out of the courthouse. And, the crowds kept getting bigger and bigger. And I will never in my life forget the feeling walking out of that courthouse after we won and seeing the throngs of people lining the streets with signs and giving us the I love you sign in sign language. And I had such love in my heart for everybody, and I was drinking it in. I was trying to make eye contact with everybody in that crowd. I just wanted to make a connect. I would have kissed everybody in that crowd if I could. And I'll never forget it. It was such a special experience.
My perspective is similar, but a little different in some ways than David's. Similar in that the real heroes in my mind are those people who put on the uniform for their country, don't make a lot of money,
exactly.
Don't sacrifice their lives, be it a first responder, a military person. They literally put their lives on the line, and they may not see their family when they come home. And so to me, I have a special and limited definition of a hero. However, I do view ourselves as a step down below heroes, but
what I thought
somewhat of
that is like, that's literally what Breenan started his entire case with the opening statements of, right? The heroes are the first responders in the long run. And I'm not saying that's not true. It's just funny that that's something that's just a personal philosophy of his. And it happens to be also what Breenan said. Although I don't know that Breenan has an actual personal philosophy. I think he's very changeable, but he definitely touted that as a part of his opening statement. So
of an elevated status. And I view that as being a vessel, being privileged to take on the desires, the wants, and the cries for justice of the millions of people who have watched this trial and watched what happened. So in that regard, I almost feel somewhat like an avatar for everybody. And so with that comes a responsibility to work hard, do good, because we're the only thing between those folks and just disappointment. And so I consider it a stepping up. there are significant financial sacrifices. Everybody on this team made personal financial sacrifices. I'm not going to go into the details, but they're real. And however, and David has heard me say this before, there are different kinds of income in my mind. There's monetary income that everybody knows about. There's psychic income, which gives you a feeling of joy in what you're doing. And then there's spiritual income. And whether it's religious or just whatever spiritual,
this is really beautiful.
that's income. And I will tell you for myself, the spiritual income from being able to work on this case, to be a vessel through which millions of people could exist and see that we're every one of them. We have some skill sets that we can do maybe a little bit more, but many people, as David said, did so many things and sacrificed. Also, I felt really that there's a limited number of attorneys in my mind who would actually end up doing this. And so I want to credit my team member. Anybody once in the many months, and
you're about to get to where I was about to, I think.
Yeah, I just came on the second trial. David YANETTI, Alan Jackson, Liza Little. This was their second, and no one ever mentioned one peep about how this is affecting me in whatever way. So I want to give credit particularly to my co-counsel for the sacrifices they made, and a step down below hero, but maybe a little bit more than your average person.
I think you guys might be being too humble, because if anybody ever comes at you, you can say, we saved a life. And when I think of the files that I have, that I like feel good about, I don't think about the file where I made a pile of money. I think about the file that I did for basically nothing. I can't remember if it was 4 or 5, 6, somewhere around that files, like separate sets of charges. I got $50 out of it, but I saved a guy's leg. And that's what I think about. And the thing is that guy had gone from courtroom to courtroom. When you say anybody would do it, it's not the case. It's that the people who step up will do it. Right. I mean, I'm sure you could have found any number of lawyers who would have said, I'll do this.
But then they would have
if the money's there.
Yeah.
But you guys stepped up and kept at it. And, that to me is, I put tremendous value in that myself. And I am, in awe and grateful for the example. So, don't sell yourselves too short, I guess, is the, what about, sort of did you guys have other sacrifices? Because we heard, some witnesses talking about, harassment and so forth. Has that affected you? Has that been sort of something that's been in your life and a concern?
I would imagine.
Not really. Social media is a very powerful tool, and we've had so much positive feedback that it's been so gratifying to read that. And then on the other side, we've made enemies, and there are people watching right now who hate my guts. I'm so lovable. How can you hate me?
Well, it's funny because Proctor apparently hated him even before this case came along, right? So.
But no, I mean, there are people that disagree with our stance in this case, are very angry at how hard we have pushed our defense, and I understand that, but I don't internalize it. They say whatever they want about me, and I'm sorry, but it just rolls off my back. It doesn't bother me.
Yeah, and me neither. I mean, I'm a boxer. I go in and get hit for fun, involuntarily. None of that daunts me, and it doesn't affect me whatsoever. But I also think of our client, Karen Reed. If you could just begin to even imagine what she's gone through, what she's taken, and what she's taken every day with her entire liberty at stake, to me, Bob ALESSI taking an adverse comment, being threatened, whatever it is, it's just like it just pales in comparison. But more importantly than all of that is I would like to believe that what this defense team has done deters what has happened to Miss Reed. That the next whomever it is, law enforcement, whatever, they think about doing what happened here, where they miscalculated the strength of the response of Karen Reed. I would like to hope that serves as a deterrent, in that whatever little effect of us, a threat or whatever, that we see that it's worth it, because if there's one less Karen Reed victim in the world, then it's all worth it. But I'm hopeful that whatever we've incurred has avoided many injustices that otherwise might have incurred, because people say, wow, we better be careful, because if we misstep, maybe we see a team like the Karen Reed team again, and maybe we just do the right thing.
This time they really tangled with a porcupine. Karen Reed was tougher than they gave her credit for, and it
oh yes, oh
it
yes,
didn't work out for them at all.
No, they had no idea what they were up against. I mean, you hit on a good point. I mean, this defense team was very tough. We did our jobs, but it was Karen Reed that would not be bent.
Do you think there'll be sort of corollary consequences for, like, we've seen Proctor is no longer Trooper Proctor. I don't know what he's going to be doing with his life at this point, but I wish him a long career that has no authority over people. Do you think there's going to be, sort of follow-up consequences, that there's going to be more people who maybe, see sanctions
Heather.
or some other punishment for their
Heather?
involvement in this whole thing?
I think there's two broad categories to the answer to that. In 30 seconds, I think there's the legal, new or continued legal matters to address these matters. And I'm saying it purposefully obtusely. But I think there's also a democratic approach and democracy. We have an absolutely wonderful country in the United States. I know Canada has a great system as well. I know the United States, I don't know Canada as well. But we have a system where we've got a great democracy, and I am hopeful that the great people of this country that I love will take action, exercise the right to vote, stand up, be heard, and cause reform to be made. And do it in a constructive way, a peaceful way, but an aggressive way. And so I'm hopeful that even more than the legal avenues, that people who have engaged so wonderfully and smartly stay engaged and cause change to be made, because change needs to be made in matters that we've experienced. So that's my hope, is that the democracy and the groundswell continues. And I think that's the best way to effectuate, and most enduring way to effectuate change.
What do you think? Have you guys seen the sort of Proctor, McCabe, Albert sort of reputation rehabilitation tour that they seem to be on? Do you have any thoughts on any of their interviews or any of those sort of things they've been up to?
Have you seen it, Bob?
I've seen only very quick summaries on social media. I have not watched one video on it, so I have not.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really seen the interview start to finish. I've just seen some snippets. I mean, they seem like they're upset, and they have every right to be heard. I'm really not focusing on that. I think that's for others to comment on, I think.
In some ways, I think that might be the best if nobody watches them. But
yeah, I believe our legal system is constructed and is the best vehicle to get the truth out. And I really wish that those folks would have been under oath to tell their story under oath, because that is the way our system is constructed to get the truth out the best. That didn't happen in the second trial, but in our system, that's the way for the truth to come out the best. Other vehicles for doing that, I leave it to others to do what they do in those fora. But I think time and time again, it's proven that you raise your hand and you go under oath. That's the way the truth comes out the best.
I will say that one thing that has been very disappointing to me in the aftermath of this verdict is the number of legal commentators, some of whom are licensed attorneys, some of whom are former FBI or law enforcement, who have come out and criticized the jury in this case.
yes.
I think that is pornographic.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Could agree more. You guys know how this will get me riled up like nothing else when the people saying shit about the jury. Like, no, not on my watch. No, sir, no, ma'am. No.
I think it's outrageous, and nobody who operates within this system should be criticizing a jury that spent even an hour evaluating evidence and a 2-minute verdict, never mind taking 3 months out of their lives and several days to hash out the evidence and decide whether the state has proven a case beyond a reasonable doubt. I think, ironically, District Attorney Morris
That is so interesting. StreamYard crashed again, guys. Remember it did that the other day? StreamYard crashed again. Okay. Wow, interesting. Okay, let's back this up a little bit to where it was before the crash happened. It's very interesting how it does that. Okay. StreamYard, get your shit together, man. All righty.
even an hour evaluating evidence and a 2-minute verdict, never mind taking 3 months out of their lives and several days to hash out the evidence and decide whether the state has proven a case beyond a reasonable doubt. I think, ironically, District Attorney Morrissey had it right when he came out with a statement that was just 4 words, which is the jury has spoken.
Yeah.
That's all we should be hearing now from the other side. We shouldn't be hearing any attacks on the jury or what they did or didn't do, particularly from lawyers.
Yeah.
How can you do that as
Right.
a lawyer?
For sure.
And how can you ask for anyone to respect you if you are criticizing what a jury has done in the great system that we have? So that made me feel better to get that off my chest. Thank you.
Oh, I was going to get there and ask if you've seen, A, some of that criticism, because I share your feelings on it. But B, if you've seen the juror interview, like some of the juror interviews that have been released.
Yeah, I haven't seen the juror interviews. I've seen, again, social media snippets about what they may say, which I just can't wait. I need to see and hear the whole thing. But I want to say this, and this is the first thing of substance that I said immediately after we left the courthouse. I looked over at the courthouse and said, God bless those 12 men and women on the jury. God bless them. They performed so ably, not because of the result we got. They paid such close attention. David and I have been in front of a lot of juries. They were so attentive. They took notes. They were poker players. You seldom would see, with a few exceptions, any reaction. They did their job. They had the front row seat. This is our system. This is a great system. And I couldn't agree with David more. I'm outraged, particularly at attorneys.
Yeah.
Some people in the lay media, maybe because maybe they don't know the sacrosanct nature of the jury and the jury system. But I am equally outraged of any legal professional that mentions one word about the jury other than God bless you, thank you for your service, your sacrifices, and I just don't get it.
There have been in the past like historical miscarriages with juries and so forth. This jury, the ones who've given interviews and so forth, it is very clear that they took things very seriously. And the comments, I actually, here in Canada, we can't interview jurors. It's actually illegal to go up to a juror and ask them a question. My wife was on a jury. I don't know anything about the trial.
Crazy.
Because I, take that seriously. But my faith in the system was restored tremendously watching some of those interviews and the degree of thought. And it wasn't just any, we see criticism that they just were like, oh, they were free Karen Reed people who snuck onto the jury, which is scurrilous and has no basis. But just the way they put thought into it and the way they express skepticism of both sides. There's evidence that it's clear that the defense brought that they were not convinced by, and other things that they were, and ultimately they weighed all of that. I have it really restores a lot of my my faith in everything. I wanted to ask about Victoria George. She was a non-deliberating juror in the first trial, and then came on and joined the team. So, are you guys able to comment on on that? Which is, this trial piles up unprecedented things. I don't know that that's ever happened before.
Yeah, I don't think it has either. I mean, we really can't talk about strategy, behind the scenes and conversations that included our client and the attorneys. But I can say, generally speaking, that Victoria was an asset to us. during the course of this trial. She was, she's got very young children. She was pregnant during the first trial with twins. So, I mean, she made a tremendous sacrifice to make herself available to us, particularly at the start of the trial when she was in court with us when we were picking a jury, and she was a full team member. We couldn't ask her to, be there for the entire trial. I mean, I'm amazed that she was able to take, the time that she did during jury selection. But I will say that, she was active. She was, motivated. She's smart. I think that's as far as I will go without getting behind the scenes.
The conventional wisdom is to keep lawyers off of the jury, and it sounds like there's been a lawyer on each panel. So that's probably getting too much into strategy about why you wouldn't bounce the lawyer. But I thought that was a very interesting aspect. Lawyers, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. You please finish. I thought you finished.
I was saying the conventional wisdom is bounce lawyers just with prejudice every time you see them.
Lawyers have different styles, and I respect them with jury selection. Mine is pretty simple. Get the smartest, fairest, most honest people you can. Put your trust in them. Put on a case. Provide them with as much truthful and accurate and probative evidence as you can, and let them perform their role. So to me, whether it's a lawyer, a doctor, whomever it is, just get those types of people on, and usually justice will be served.
That I think that's commendable, because that indicates that you have confidence in your case. If you're like, I need smart people who can sort of pick through this, that to me is sort of a strong moment there. What were your days like when you're not, in court? Of course, you're in court, but in the evening, what were you guys, what did you guys get up to? What sort of, what was sort of the average day like there?
You speak to that, Bob.
Well, we're up very early in the morning. I was up at like 4:50 in the morning, 5 o'clock the latest. I have a routine in the morning, did my routine. We'd meet downstairs in the hotel lobby around 8 in the morning. I bring my one of my most prized possessions, which is my YANETTI cooler.
I love this so much.
I rented condo space in the cooler to the namesake, David YANETTI.
I love it
bring
so much.
his food. He'd put it in there in the cooler. We had a little routine.
Were there any ham sandwiches?
I love it.
No, I'm familiar with the reference to the ham sandwich. I'd like to believe that I had a little bit of an influence on David's food selection. David is, I think, I call him the Adonis. He's very fit, and we would eat healthy because we had the YANETTI. We would go to court, put in everything we had, go to lunch to his denim office, hurry back, be done with our day, come back, we'd eat, and then we'd go right back to preparing for the next day. We did do something that was a bit of a luxury. David and I joined the Equinox Health Club. So what we tried to do was, as much as we could, sleep be damned, as we go to the Equinox and we'd do our cardio, we do lifting weights. And it was a great release, feel like you were doing something positive. I do it as much for behavioral health as I do it for physical health, but we were gym rats a bit. And
I love that. Can you
every once in a while,
can you imagine going to the gym and then be like, oh, look, there's ALESSI and YANETTI working out. Can you imagine that?
Try to be normal people and laugh. I got to tell you, this team had a tremendous sense of humor. Just
it's so true.
The people who did impressions of people who had, it was just fabulous. And I got to tell you, I can remember one time distinctly that I laughed so hard, I thought my stomach muscles had seized, and I had to literally run away from the table because the person who was doing some imitation had me laughing so hard. I literally had to leave the table. It was a great culture among the team. We knew what we were doing. We're serious, but we also enjoyed our company and did some normal things.
Yeah, we really did enjoy being together. I mean, even more so than the last trial, we were all under a tremendous amount of stress. But, I thought we worked very well together. I had told you, we were open to others' suggestions, and we all were rowing in the same direction all the time. And those times when we could get away from the work temporarily, enjoy a meal together or get a cup of coffee or whatever, everybody had a great sense of humor. Nobody took themselves too seriously. And yeah, we genuinely enjoyed being together, which, thank God we were together for, 3 months in a hotel away from our families, right?
Karen dubbed it the adult dorm.
Yeah.
I mean, if you guys couldn't get along, the tensions would have started to show up at some point in this trial. And I never saw any indication that you guys were anything other than just working entirely as a team. Have you guys formed is a bond? Are you guys going to all stay in touch, or
So this is,
have you sort of?
I think this is the part that I really love, where we learn just how special their bromance, friendship is, which I love.
Can I answer this? Because I thought of something appropriate to mention here. I had one of my best friends was starting a new job at a firm in his late 30s. And I checked in with him and I said, hey, have you met anybody there that is a good guy or made a connection? And he said, Dave, he said, you got to understand something. You have gone through a tremendous screening process. I've met people in elementary school and high school and college and after college. I've met thousands of people, and you've made it through that screening process, and you're my good friend. What are the chances that Bob sitting next to me at my next job is going to make it through that same screening process? The chances are so small, I'm not even interested, right? So he was like, I've got my friends, right? I, at age 62, have proven that theory wrong, because I've met one of my best friends who will remain my best friend. I consider him like a brother, and he's on this screen with me right now. And I feel so fortunate that, this experience and one other case that we did together has brought us together. So your question, will we stay in touch? There's not a doubt that we will stay in touch. He's one of my best friends now. And by the way, that's taking nothing away from Alan Jackson and Liza Little and Karen Reed. I love them all like brothers and sisters, but Bob and I have a special connection.
Yeah, I agree completely with David, and not to try to do a one-up, but I'm 5 years older than David. So finding one of my best friends at 67 years old is also something I didn't think would happen, but it's happened, and it's just another joyous outcome of this trial. So absolutely, we've already started to think about the subject matter. God willing, if we're 82 on a rocking chair someplace, hopefully we'll remember some things of this trial, and just sort of hopefully, it was sort of like throwing back of high moments, and hopefully we remember this thing when we're sitting in that rocking chair someplace with a smile on our face, as David says, enjoying the cool of the evening.
Can I just note that for 62 and 67, the two of you do not look your ages. I am kind of in awe of that. So, and the chat is going, there is no way.
Well, and by the way, the chat has not seen Bob in a tank top at the gym either. So that would reinforce that.
I regret to inform you that the picture of Bob working out or flexing has been a popular one for people on, on screen thumbnails. I was
fair enough.
At first, I thought it must be a Photoshop, because I was like, there is no way. And then nope, that's a whole thing.
Well, listen, David's been gracious to not post his, because if he does, then I am not going to be able to survive the comparison. Someday, hopefully, the world sees what I see.
It's and Bob, you'd mentioned some of your hobbies, but David, what do you do to sort of relax and try to, when you're not in the thick of lawyering, sort of to keep sane? Because
yeah, so it's kind of a difficult question to answer for me right now, because I haven't done anything like that in months, and I'm like, what do I do with my time right now? So I have two sons who are 19 and 23 who have gotten into golf, and I am the world's worst golfer, but it's a real good way to kind of capture their attention for 4 hours. So I take my sorry ass onto the course and spray balls into the woods, and don't worry about looking for them, and just drop on the fairway and keep going. And I have a 12-year-old daughter who I haven't seen in so long, and I'm going to learn, I think, shortly whether she still wants to hang with her dad or is it all about her friends at this point. So yeah, I'm trying to see my family and spend some quality time at home.
I wanted to add just to that, our families have made the biggest sacrifice here, and I've got a tremendous, lovely wife, Ellen ALESSI, who was a year behind me in law school, had a successful law career, gave it up to raise our two beautiful, wonderful adult daughters, now Laura and Grace. And as my oldest often says, she's the backbone of the family. She did everything. This is a very, very intelligent woman who, for this trial, literally made all my food, packaged it, took my shirts, ironed them, and was just totally into full support as she has been through our whole marriage. And so, to me, sort of getting back and treating her with everything she deserves and taking time to focus on her is going to be a joy, and that will be my new hobby that I take on. And I've met another joyous aspect of this. David's just absolutely lovely wife, Robin, and we've talked about all the things that we need to do and catch up with our spouses. But the sacrifice spouses make in this legal profession, if you're going to do it at a certain level, is just not only intense, but it's long-standing. And I can speak for myself. My wife, Ellen, has just been absolutely there every year, every day, so that we can take on these and not have the stress of, gee, is my spouse going to be mad? But totally into it. So I just wanted to make sure that is known with regard to what my new hobby is going to be, is to really pay attention to that and make sure there's the reciprocity that is due.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the sacrifices, families make, because that is a huge, even just in terms of temperament. I've had moments where you're in like a week-long trial and you come home and your wife is glad to see you. And you're like, I have used every bit of my energy on this trial and I have to get ready for tomorrow. And I'm really sorry. And finding somebody who understands that and is able to deal with it, but they carry a lot of weight. So I'm really glad to see you guys, recognizing that and appreciating that, because I think that's important. This was a question somebody asked, that did Dr. Russell ever get to talk to Dr. Laposata after everything was done? Because she'd sort of expressed disappointment about not getting to read the report. So people were like, did that ever happen?
Let me tell you that I cannot say enough about Dr. Russell and Dr. Laposata. What incredibly brilliant, established, esteemed doctors. My Lord. I don't know the answer to the question. I do know that there was incredible mutual admiration. And as you know, you don't want experts, I don't anyway, talking to each other, not just because of sequestration order, but just for purity of opinion. But the short answer is I don't know if they've had the opportunity to speak afterward. I just remain in awe of both of them, not only for their brilliance, their intelligence, their careers, but how they comported themselves on the stand with regard to a manner of examination that I wish would not have happened.
Can I mention something personal about Dr. Russell? I'm taking some liberties with regard to my brother-in-law, whom I love. But during this trial, he was bitten by a dog on the hand, badly. And
sorry.
I happened to mention it to Dr. Russell after she testified, and she took such an interest in. I want to see the photos. Can I, give you some advice on how to handle this? And, because my sister had asked me, can you, he was bit and it looked terrible. I saw the photos and they think there might be a little piece of the tooth still in the hand. Does he need surgery? And so I was like, well, I've got like the leading doctor in the world right here. Maybe I can catch her before she leaves. And, she gave him advice and it all worked out great. But more than that, just to tell you what type of person she is, she followed up 3 or 4 times on her own without being asked, asking how the patient was and checking in with them. And I was just blown away. She is like the salt of the earth. She's obviously brilliant and as Bob says, a tremendous witness. But it may be one of the most caring people. And her story is so remarkable in terms of her background. We actually have mutual friends because she used to be a Malden police officer. One of my good friends was the chief of police in Malden and knew her when she was a beat cop. She is a remarkable, remarkable woman. And that's just, sort of an addition to what she did during the trial. I thought our experts in this case were head and shoulders above any experts in any case I've ever seen and ever been involved in. Dr. Laposata was unbelievable. Dr. Russell, Dr. Rentschler, Dr. Wolf, everybody that we called, we were so fortunate.
First of all, you're trying to get through Dr. Russell's resume, and it's you needed more days just to get through that. I would love to read, like, if she ever writes a book about her life, I would love to read that. And I share your I guess consternation at how she was treated in especially in the voir dire. I and a lot of other people found that to be hard to watch. And even in the follow-up, he asked a question, do you have memory issues? And you could see her like audibly gasp. I felt bad, but she held her own. She didn't get angry. She didn't get I was incredibly impressed. And whenever I sort of think about, you know, the best of the best witnesses of the trial, the best people, like the people, I also think of people like Lucky Loughran.
Oh, salt of the earth.
I let me tell you, David YANETTI worked with him, and I believe the whole world saw a person who spoke the truth, who was courageous, but to have a witness who's not a witness. This is this person who, you know, worked for the Public Works Department. His life is not being a witness. And David YANETTI, with his endless compassion and charm, made Lucky comfortable so he could sit on the stand and not only tell the truth, but withstand attacks against him about telling the truth. That's the type of lawyering that the public never sees, but I saw, and it was just absolutely tremendous so that he could be comfortable enough to tell the truth. And Ian, as you know, being the lawyer that you are, witness preparation, and preparation in the good sense, just you're going to be okay, and you know this may come up, and just so that they can sit there and tell the truth. David YANETTI is a master at that and making people feel valued and comfortable. And I think the manifestation of that came through. I think that was one of the most important witnesses of the whole trial.
I think that he was a witness that Brennan did very poorly against, because he came off as a witness who really didn't have a dog in the fight. I got the sense that if he had something to say that would have hurt your side, he would have just said it, because he didn't, you know, he just didn't seem to have any stake in it other than, I have a responsibility to come in and tell the truth, and I'm going to do it. And I wish there was a way to like help Lucky, but from what I understand, what Lucky wants most in the universe at this point is for everybody to leave him alone and just to go be Lucky. And I mean, of all the modest, if
there's a hero of the trial, that's a guy that I look up to. You know, I don't get the sense that he's gotten a lot of praise for the good things that he does, the everyday things that he does. You know, his wife was very sick, and he was a devoted husband, taking care of her. I mean, this is a man that you can count on. And you know, I've been in touch with him since the trial, and I consider him to be a friend now. And somebody that I'm privileged to have known. I mean, Lucky Loughran is the salt of the earth.
I get the sense that, like, if I was in Canton and like had driven my truck off the road and needed somebody to like help pull it out, and I called Lucky out of the blue, just as somebody he'd never heard of, and just was like, I need help, I get the sense that he'd be there as a, you know, and he just wouldn't have any, you know, questions. He'd just be like, let me get out there. And he'd also be the guy, I get the sense that if you were sitting there going, hey, can I give you, you know, some cash for helping me out? He would have said no.
No, not a chance. No, that's spot on, Ian, spot on.
You know, I understand he sort of wants to be left alone, but I really hope he understands that he's sort of loved by the world, I guess is the feeling on that one. What can people do at this point to help Karen? Because she's, you know, she's won, but it's always the thing I always have to explain to clients, and I'm sure you've gone through, and I don't want to know about what you've gone through, but you know, you win a trial and you walk away with basically nothing. And, you know, the system can trample you, and then you say, what are you going to do to make me right? And they say, you know, I would be surprised if they even put the entertainment console back into her Lexus before they, you know, so.
No, it's so true.
And
you know, consider that she had a rich and full life as of January 28th. I mean, she was an accomplished professional with a full-time job in finance and assistant professor position, and she lost everything. So you see us celebrating after the verdict, and certainly that was justified and heartfelt. But I think once the dust settles, I think she'll have to decide what the next step is. And I think her legal issues are not yet over. There's still a civil lawsuit pending against her. I don't know what will happen to that in light of this verdict. I think that by all rights should be dropped. But I don't practice in that area of law, and I don't know where that's going. So I imagine the legal defense fund is still active. She's still going to need expert witnesses for that case. The public has been incredibly generous. So I think that's all I'll say.
And I hope that continues, quite honestly, because that's been a whole thing. Have you guys been following Turtle Boy as well? Because that's kind of a corollary to this. Do you have any thoughts on Turtle Boy's prosecution? I know you're not counsel there, but any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, my hope is that enough's enough. They went after Karen Read with everything they possibly could, and he's collateral damage to that. He was aggressive. There's no doubt in the manner in which he asked questions. But it's funny. Somebody posted a video of 60 Minutes going to somebody's door and sticking a microphone in somebody's face and making accusations, and that's like old time journalism. I do not believe that the state's going to get convictions against him either. And the case that he was involved in has now been shown to have been really a false case. At most, this turned out to be a first offense drunk driving conviction. So I hope they come to their senses and stop this prosecution. I'm certainly rooting for him.
And we're over the time that I sort of asked you guys for. I really appreciate you guys are of course welcome to stay, but I am well over, and I know at least Bob, I'm holding you back from family and so forth. So aside from celebrating that Karen Read is free, any sort of final words here for people? Anything I missed out on, and or so.
David,
I just want to reiterate how much we sincerely appreciate all of the support that we got. I don't know that we would be here without everybody out there who has fought with us, fought for us, buoyed us. You all are heroes in my view.
Yeah, very similar to David's comment. I have always been impressed with humanity. I am particularly impressed with the community that got interested in this case, got involved, didn't sit on the sidelines, and participated in the now very large community. And my hope is that those people who are in whatever system and it's not treating them fairly and justly, I'm hopeful that they have a community very similar to the community that Karen had, because in certain instances, it's not enough to have friends and it's not enough to have family.
Yeah.
You really do need the larger community. And I am going to be eternally grateful, because as hard as we worked as attorneys, as many opportunities we've had to try to effectuate our skills,
100%.
this result would not have happened without this very large community. It just wouldn't have happened.
Wow.
Thank you guys so much for both appearing and for everything you've done. You guys are the people who stepped up, and you've achieved something historic. I really do think that when they are teaching, famous trials, significant trials, this is one that deserves to be taught. I'm certainly trying to push the local law school to let me teach a course on advocacy through famous trials. And I can say that there are numerous moments where I would want to highlight the excellent work you guys did and just say, like, look, this is how you cross-examine an expert. This is how you cross-examine a difficult witness.
Yeah.
This is how, all of these things.
This is how you handle being appearing in front of an incredibly biased judge. I don't think he says that, but I'm saying it.
I don't know that we'll ever see a trial like this. I feel like it's all downhill for legal coverage from now. So thank you guys so much. Really, really do appreciate it. And I'd love to stay in touch. I know you guys are super busy, but I will probably harass you via email. So assuming you're willing to put up with it, so thank you guys. Yeah. And I will let you go. I've got a stack of super chats. I understand you guys. I mean, I'm not going to chase you off, but I understand people have got to go. So cheers. Thank you so much.
It was great to meet you, Ian, and really thanks for having us.
Yes.
I can speak football. We loved it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye, David.
See you.
Oh my gosh, how great was this?
Oh.
And way to go, Runkle. It'll be really fun to see what happens next because it sounds like they might go on other channels, but also I would expect, and potentially this is already lined up and we just don't know it yet, that Jackson and Miss Little are going to come on as a pair, probably on Runkle as well. I mean, maybe, I don't know, right? But that would make sense. That would make sense. Anyway, it'll just be really fun to see what else comes out, you know, as they give more interviews. You know, more jurors are speaking out, and there's more stuff coming out every day. So I think tomorrow we'll have plenty more to comment on, because already there's been, again, like a number of other things that came out today. And again, shout out Fender actually mentioned that Jackson gave, I guess, like a shorter interview to some person, so we can watch that as well. But I think that'll be it for this one, guys. Just what a momentous thing to have happened here, and I'm just so proud of Runkle and happy for Runkle. You know, what a great follow-up to this verdict, right? But also I'm very proud of you guys for being the best squirrels in the world. I love y'all. Y'all are amazing. But yeah, I hope you guys have a great night or morning or day, depending on where you are on the planet. And we will be back tomorrow with more of this. And I think probably Sunday we'll do the Coburger that we need to get caught up on. But anyway, for now, squirrel out.